Everyone, good morning to those online. I'm just going to start off with a prayer Karakia first. Mianoi tātou, let us pray. E te atua, tēnei o, tēnei mātou, o mema kua poti te hapore o Whanganui, arahina I a mātou ki te whakatau ngā whakatonga pai, mo te rohi, mo te tangata katoa, kia piki, ai te ora o te hapori, me nā iwi katoa o Whanganui, hau mai hui e, taiki e. Dear God, here we are, your elected members of Whanganui. Guide us to make good decisions for the district, for all people, to uplift the community and all peoples of Whanganui. Bring forth unity. It is done. Amen. Great. So apologies. We have, I'd like to move that the Council accept the apologies of Councillor Charlotte Melser and grant leave of absence this morning. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Josh. And we've also got Councillor Peter Oscom online as well, but he's participating in this meeting. All those in favour? Against? Item is carried. Thank you. Item 3 is leave of absence. Do we have any? We don't have any leaves of absence, I understand. So I'd like to put. Oh, no. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Any declarations of interest? All right. Now we've got some additional information that the council tables the following additional information with relevant items. Item 6.1, Annual Plan 2023 to 2024, Summary of Submissions and Feedback. Item 6.1, Annual Plan 2023 to 24, Managers' Comments and Proposed Officer Resolutions. Item 6.1 again, Cuts and Deferral Schedule for the Annual Plan 2023 to 2024. Like Kate move and Councillor Ross second. All those in favour? Against? Item is carried. Right. As far as I've got I'm trying to develop a tradition to do a Mayoral Message for those online. To be frank, I haven't found midnight a few hours in the last week, so I haven't officially got a message to read out. So, but what I will say is that what's on top of my mind is that I'm listening to a fellow mayor yesterday who said who's been around for a long time, who said he has never ever faced so much activity in local government and so much pressure, and you know, that presents for all of us an opportunity as well as the need to face into the issues that we have as well. Now, we didn't come into this job, none of us did, to knowing it was going to be easy, but on top of the increased pressure on us at the moment, you know, it's no doubt difficult times, but ultimately we're here for our community, and it's for those that we need to remind ourselves that's why we are here. I've certainly had to ask myself that question as well as I get busy behind my desk and emails and meetings. The thing that's missing for me right now is being out there and being visible, and so and perhaps losing sight sometimes that it's the community that we're here for. I don't speak necessarily for all of you, I speak for myself. So trying to find balance in our roles as elected members is certainly challenging right now in the midst of so much going on. In saying that, we did ask for it. We put our hands up for this, and so and it's with that in mind that we take up the challenge and the mantle to do the best for our community with the pressures, but also the opportunities we face. and I'm not going to go through the list of everything that we've got on, but there's certainly some large projects that the council has underway, and some and varying degrees of progress. But also, from a wider perspective, there's continued uncertainty. I bought some shares the other day, and they're going up and down like a yo-yo, and that kind of presents how life is at the moment with all of us. And going out to the community, what I do notice is I talked last time, I think, about the second question, how are you doing? When I talk to people, and they go, I'm good, and I go, how are you really doing? And then they say, well, actually, how did you know, kind of thing. And we get into this conversation around what's going on in people's lives, and it's quite real out there. And so I, again, go back to that point that we are here for the community, and that's important to know that. And talking of the community, what this is for 6 of us, these annual plan deliberations and this annual plan process is new for us. For some of you, you've been around the traps before, some of you for a long time, but I think it's a real privilege to be able to go out and consult with the community on a range of issues, and for them to feed back. And I think we had a 55% increase on annual plan submissions from last year. And so my desire is that we bring council to the people. And part of that is the requirements under Local Government Act to consult with our public, but also, so it's pleasing to see that we've got that increase and that uptick from last year, but also we still need to find ways of reaching our people and going out to them and them feeling welcome to come to us. So welcome to some of you online, but also in the room here. Thank you for being here. So with this annual plan deliberations today, I think it's exciting for me anyway that we've got to this point. What the challenge we've obviously got this year in particular is we have cost pressures like we haven't seen for years, and I can personally go back to the days of I think it was about the early 80s when we had higher interest rates and high inflation, but certainly we are under immense pressure to find the balance of doing things for our community, in our community, projects, initiatives, but we're also need to find the balance as well of keeping our rates as low as we can. And so finding that balance is something that we've been at pains to do, and whether we've got it right or not is a question that we'll give multiple responses to, from both around this room but also from our public as well. And I think about I've said to a lot of people that I can't sing and I can't dance and I can't do lots of things, I can't draw, but what I can do is I can often find it quite easy to look into the future. And if I look out to next year, these cost pressures are not going to go away. We will live in, hopefully they're on the way down, but I think next year is going to be another really tough year for trying to get rates at a level where we can find that balance again about community affordability, but also getting on and doing things for our city and for our district, our rural area as well. But yeah, as I said, we've taken up that challenge, and the challenge is not just this year, it's going to be next year as well. So we will just have to continue to find ways of being efficient, and also getting that message out to our public about the challenges that we're facing and help them to understand. And so look, I won't spend any more time talking about that. I think we've got a big agenda for today, but hopefully we can get through it reasonably quickly, but take the time where we need to. So thank you. So look, well, let's move on to, I'm going to pass over to Elise, who's going to talk to us for about 15 to 20 minutes. You're going to present to us, so I'll pass over to you. Thank you. Elise?
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Mōrena, kia ora tātou, and thank you for having me to present today. I'm Elise, the Policy Manager here at Council. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone who has submitted or engaged in the annual plan consultation this year. As Andrew has said, we had a significant uptick from last year, and we greatly appreciate the time everyone has taken and for sharing your thoughts. As you all see, we've had a rich amount of feedback from the community. You will see a large volume of material has been prepared which summarises the submissions and the feedback and engagement, as well as significant documents outlining resolutions, as well as comments and responses to submitters. But I do note this is not exhaustive. It is a large amount of material for Council to work through. So if you don't see that there's a response for every submitter, be reassured that every submitter will receive a letter from Council after this process, outlining them of the decisions and any relevant responses to their questions. We also have regular contact with submitters, so we have been in regular contact with them, informing them about the process throughout, including the hearings and that deliberations are on today. So great to see some submitters here present in person, as well as welcome to those online. You'll find the council reports and documents at the links online. And also just before I begin, just a huge thank you to my team and everyone else in the finance and broader team who have prepared the material, which has been a lot of long hours and is very comprehensive. So I'll start the presentation. Do I click? Sorry, just having some IT issues. Right. So just a reminder of where we're at in the process today. Today is about the decisions on the annual plan, and the annual plan kicks in from the 1st of July 2023. So after today, once the decisions have been made by elected members, officers will then go and draft up the final annual plan, which will be adopted by 30 June. As Mayor Andrew mentioned, though, this process did kick off actually well before March in terms of staff working hard on those budgets and looking for wherever they could find savings or deferrals where we could look at work throughout through the long-term plan process, as we're very conscious of the current economic situation. So to that as well, as everyone is aware, this year was an unusual year as we had the revaluations from QV come through, and QV came to present in March, and we did some significant pre-engagement and media releases on that to ensure that the public were well aware of that process and their opportunity to appeal directly through to QV. Then we moved into our public consultation. As you'll see through the material, we ran a comprehensive process, and we did also 7 in-person engagement events. Then we moved through to hearings and deliberations today, and as mentioned, the final annual plan will be adopted before 30 June. Strike the rates will take place on 11 July, and members of the public can expect to see those rate bills come in from early August. Just a quick outline of what we'll cover in the presentation today. So starting with the significant item, the annual plan. Just a quick recap in terms of the key issues that were discussed in the consultation. As already mentioned, the big challenges and cost increases Council is facing. We clearly outlined those, as well as information about the latest QV re-evaluation and how it's having a significant impact on rates. There is significant variation in what properties are seeing in their rates rise. We really want to emphasise this, and it is well documented in the consultation material, that the 8.2%, which we went out for consultation, is an average rates rise across all sectors. And many will see declines, and many will see much more significant increases than that, which Council has very little ability, if no ability, to influence, as previously discussed. We've also outlined where those proposed deferrals and cost savings have been made, and we had key questions about the future of the Aviary and some future focus questions to help us lead into our review of our leading edge strategy and long-term plan, which starts this year. Just quickly on public consultation, as already mentioned, it was widely promoted through many different channels. You'll see there one of our in-person engagement events at the Extravaganza Fair. Was a fantastic day out. We saw lots of families and kids and young people also engage with the play trailer equipment there. As Mayor Andrew has said, we saw an uptick this year with 438 submissions and 20 speaking at hearings. In terms of demographics, I've just pulled out some key insights. So again, this is not comprehensive of all submitters because it does depend on whether or not people answer the demographic questions, and we put those as optional rather than compulsory. Just keep that in mind. And also, I haven't done a full analysis of everything. This is just some highlights as I thought these were quite interesting insights. So 80% of our formal submissions were from people who said that they were female. That was 64% last year and 45% in the long-term plan. So an interesting trend there. Submitters were from across Whanganui, from all different suburbs, but the largest groups were from Gonville and St John's Hill, Otamatea, followed by Castlecliff, Springvale and Whanganui East. Our 60 plus group was our largest group of submitters, followed by the 40 to 49 year group, and that's relatively similar to previous years. And the largest ethnic group was NZ European, followed by Māori. And we were pleased to see an increase in diversity on earlier years there, which is something we're really focused on in trying to reach as many people in our community as possible. And just briefly in terms of channels, I won't run through these one by one, but just to note where people found out about, where they stated where they found out about the consultation. And a large number of these people who did respond this year said they hadn't submitted to council before. So it's really great to see that we are reaching broader and wider into the community, and we hope this trend will continue. So on to Rotokawau, Virginia Lake Aviary. So a reminder that there was a zoologist report that came through earlier this year stating that the aviary did not meet practice for care of the animals, for the birds. So in response, we posed 3 possible options through the consultation and costings for those. Option 1 was investment to improve animal welfare standards and the visitor educational experience. That had a combined cost of $750. Investment in the aviary to address animal welfare standards only, and this was the preferred option by council, and that came at a $400,000 operating and capital cost. And option 3 was closure of the aviary, which came at a one-off cost for next year of $75,000. Hopefully people can see these results at home on the computer. Apologies, it is a little small, but in response to the options, you will see that it was fairly close between those 2 options, option 1 and option 2. 41% or 181 elected option 1, 44% or 191 people elected option 2. And then option 3, which was closure, 38 people or 9%. And there were a number of people who didn't submit on the aviary, 28 people. So just some key themes. You will find that in the summary of submissions document there is a very comprehensive summary of the key themes for each option. You'll also find key quotes as well if you want to dig a bit deeper, but I've just lifted a few things up. The overriding sort of key theme was from the community that the aviary should be kept open because of regular personal enjoyment by themselves or by other locals. And then probably the second most dominant theme was the aviary should be kept open because it is considered a tourist attraction. Now, for those who opted for closure, the most common theme was due to concerns over animal welfare, as well as the emphasis on native birds and wildlife being preferred over exotics, and the keenness for investment in other wildlife experiences. So here I have summarised some of the themes under each option. I won't read out each one, as I think I've probably covered it enough. But just to note that some people, while they opted for example, they opted for the minimal investment, they did say, we'd like to see more, but we appreciate the current economic situation you're in. And others... so there was sort of a mix of views across some of the options. People wouldn't necessarily fit directly into one, but it was helpful where they indicated the reasons for why they opted. And I just wanted to emphasise as well that there was a really strong underpinning theme that the community feel there are limited free activities or wildlife experiences for kids and families in the Whanganui area. And people really want to see more of these, more accessible and more outdoor experiences and opportunities. And the Aviary is free, so in that sense it's greatly accessible for many people, and it is fairly accessible in terms of location rather than some of our other wildlife opportunities which may be further out of Whanganui. So just to note that as well. So in terms of officers' approach to this, what we've seen is the community is broadly split on the options. We're recommending minor immediate work to address the animal welfare concerns, but staff still need to do more work to scope out design options and costs. And any investment above the minimal investment would need to be considered through a long-term plan, process and business case, and be considered alongside all the other projects that we may be doing. We also recommend that fundraising and co-funding opportunities should be pursued, and I understand from Mayor Andrew that he has been approached by a number of people who have recommended this as well. So these are the draft recommendations that we will discuss in a minute. I won't go through them now as we will be having a separate process where we'll run through these shortly. Now, I just wanted to also touch on the future focus questions. So these were questions that were helping us to understand what does the community want us to focus on in the short term, what is really important to our community. And what was really interesting was the thing that came up top was open spaces, parks and recreation as the top thing. And I will caveat that by saying this is in the context of the Aviary consultation, so it's possible that is why that's come up. But also, as mentioned earlier, there was a strong theme that the community would like to see more of these opportunities in Whanganui, followed by housing and homelessness, business growth and economic development, roading and transport, environment and sustainability, including waste and recycling. So that's our short term, we asked. And then in contrast, over the long term, where we asked 10 to 30 years, we saw business growth and economic development, housing, climate change, infrastructure, and the big central government work programs like education, healthcare, mental health, etc. were really on people's minds at the moment. And I think this makes complete sense as to why we see this difference between the short and the long term. We also used idea boards at our community events to just engage people. There are many people in our community who don't want to make a formal submission, and we want to provide them with ways in which they can still put their feedback in and be heard. So what we asked people to do was pop up their ideas on their boards, the boards there, and or just tick ones that they supported. And this lines up relatively well with what we heard through the submission, that the top ones were open spaces, youth, young people, and recycling rubbish. And I think youth, young people came through as we're out and about, particularly engaging with young people. So that was really great to ensure that we were hearing from them as well. And then in terms of that longer term, in contrast, climate change, environment, business growth and economic development. Again, that lines up relatively well with what we heard through submissions. So this has been really helpful and rich information. And again, thank you to everyone who came and provided this. And if you want to dig a bit deeper, we have provided the full analysis in the report. And just briefly, we also, as another avenue, put out a survey to the Have You Say panel, which is a panel of over 900 people who have said that they want to receive information from council on consultation, events, surveys, etc. Just to note, 54% of respondents were over 60 years, so slightly different demographic for that group. Key themes that came through: concerned about the rates rise and the QV revaluations, especially for those on the fixed incomes. A mix of feedback on the Aviary, with many wanting to keep it. Questions about cuts and deferrals being made and investment wanted in other areas such as stormwater. Just to note some positive feedback about the consultation document, which was great, and more than 50% of people who responded said they had read it, but only 20% had actually put in a formal submission, which is why I think it's important that we continue to do these different avenues to get wide feedback. Moving on to fees and charges, this was consulted on concurrently with the annual plan. Changes are proposed to the fees up there. I won't read each one. And those are proposed to reflect the actual and reasonable cost of providing the services. We received only 4 submissions on fees and charges, 2 supportive, 1 against, and 1 not specifically related. So following consultation, no changes are being proposed. So just moving forward, what we're going to do now is work through the resolutions, and we have grouped these into 5 broad categories to help us move through them. There's a deliberations agenda that elected members have to help us work through each one. Obviously, the Aviary is the first one that we've already talked about, wanting to put in that immediate remedial works and then look at the business case later. The second group we'll work through are around cuts and deferrals. So we are recommending as officers to endorse the proposed cuts and deferrals we consulted on, except the climate change work, and the reason there being we did have some significant feedback about that. It's come up as a top priority for people, and we also believe that there is more work we need to be doing around our risk and adaptation planning to identify key threats in Whanganui. So there's a proposal to reinstate some of that money. We're also putting up some new funding requests, and fees and charges, as mentioned, no changes, and then there are a group of operational or other recommendations that will be brought through, and these are more about referring work-to-work programs, etc. So I won't linger on that because I'm conscious we're going to move through that process now. So I just want to say kia ora, thank you, ngā mihi to everyone, and I will hand back over to Andrew to lead us through the next process. Kia ora, thank you.
Thank you very much, Elise. That was really helpful, and hopefully it's brought everyone's minds into, or thinking into what we're about to embark into, which is the annual plan deliberations. First of all, though, we've got item 6.1, which is the we've got an opening recommendation that council considers the submissions and feedback on the proposed annual plan 2023 to 2024 and proposed fees and charges 2023 to 24. Can I have a I'm moving that. Can I have a seconder? I've got Rob, Councillor Rob. Okay. All those in favour? Oh, okay. Right. Councillor Kate.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I had the privilege of chairing the submissions process and just wanted to mihi to all of those that submitted to us and also to my colleagues. I think it was a good day. We redesigned the room slightly. We've had a lot of feedback that it was more friendly to come into, and yeah, just sitting up the front, watching the attention that all you councillors were paying to the members of community. I was very proud of you, so thank you for that. Yeah, it was a good process, and thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Kate. Those in, Rob, Councillor Rob.
I echo what Councillor Kate has said, but I also want to raise the point that most of the ratepayers in Whanganui also pay their rates to Horizons Regional Council. And for the second year in a row, Horizons Regional Council did not conduct a public consultation process. I only raised that because I think that this council has done a very good job in getting this information out to the public with all the public meetings, and that we are here to listen to those submissions. I hope we don't ever adopt the process that Horizons have adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. So all those in favour? Against? Okay, the motion is carried. Thank you. So we move on to item 6.1. Is that right? Deliberations Report Annual Plan 2023 to 2024. Okay. Yep. So we'll start by with the Aviary first, but I just want to, before we do, echo Councillor Kate's comment and thank you to the. I got in trouble the other day for not mentioning everyone when I said thank you. So I know there's a whole lot of people been involved in this, but I think we've taken a really positive approach, and it's reflected in the amount of feedback we've had. So I just want to say thank you to all those council officers who've been involved, and often it's behind the scenes stuff that many people don't see that we need to acknowledge. And further to Councillor Kate's point about experimenting a little bit about how we hear those submissions and how we receive them, and trying to make council more accessible, I think has been worked really well. So thank you to all of those involved, and for a bit of innovation as well. So we will now move to this item. I'm just wondering, is there anyone who would like to present to that, or do you feel like you've done that? You need to talk to it?
If you want to, go for it.
So are we bringing up the Aviary?
Yeah, we'll talk just. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do the Aviary first. Then we're going to go to cuts and deferrals as a tranche, as a bundle, and then new funding requests and so on. So I'm just wondering. I know you've already talked about the Aviary, but is there any council officers that would like to add any further information?
Perhaps just to explain what this recommendation is about for the public. Officers are recommending effectively that we keep the Aviary open. We've said all along that we need to do further work to what a Aviary, enhanced Aviary looks like. So we're recommending to put in a total operating budget of up to 150,000 to include training, feed and that sort of stuff, which will help to meet some of the standards of bird care that's required. And we're going to produce a business case about what a minimum standard and an enhanced standard looks like, and that will be considered by council through the long-term plan. There were significant submissions on this, and the majority want it remained open, but they're divided about what option was about, and that's why this recommendation is here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike. So that's it from the council. We've had a fair introduction of that. First I'd like to understand Councillor Jenny, you have an alternative recommendation that you'd like to...
I have a question, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Before you do, your question.
Yep, thank you. My question is, what's been talked about as a business plan that will, work up what needs to happen to meet various standards. How long is my question? How long is it likely to take to do that?
It's like David's going to.
So, through you, Your Worship, first of all, just for clarity purposes, officers believe that we can address all of the welfare issues, the animal welfare issues, through what's put in this resolution straight away. So, if you can recall, the report from the zoological expert highlighted that a lot of the issues were related to the day-to-day management practices rather than the actual physical structure of the aviary. Feeding regimes, the numbers of birds, those kind of things. We can address those with a little bit of additional resource in addition to the volunteers we already have, and take care of that stuff straight away. The business case that we're proposing to bring back really acknowledges that appetite from the community that was expressed through the submissions process to enhance and improve the Aviary by having it offer a higher level of experience. So effectively we're going to take care of the welfare issues now so that we can keep it open, but then bring you back an option to enhance it as part of the long-term plan. Does that answer your question?
Just about. I'm thinking particularly of the cockatoos at the front, I think the white ones with the yellow prints. And I remember reading about the lack of space for them, or the perceived,
Yeah.
you know.
And again, that we think is something that we can probably manage through management practices. If we do reduce the number of birds, we can move the cockatoos around into some of the larger sub-enclosures as a short-term initiative. But we have allowed some capital expenditure as part of this resolution, not just to fund the business case, but to make some of those minor enhancements to the structures that then allows us to deal with all of the animal welfare issues.
Thank you. So my question was about how long it would take, and I hear that it's would be part of a long-term process, long-term plan process. So we're looking at a year or two, are we not?
For the enhancement business case, yes, but for the management practice improvements, that'll be done as quickly as we can recruit staff. But also there's things that we can start doing with the existing cohort of volunteers that we don't need to wait for the additional staff to kick in.
Fantastic, thank you.
Great, thank you. So just back to you, Councillor Jenny. I understand you have an alternative recommendation that you'd like to put. So which is on the screen right now. Is that correct?
Yep. So my recommendation is a bit of a hybrid between options 2 and 3, which is animal welfare and closure. And my priority is bird welfare. So is it appropriate to speak to this now?
So what I'll do is I'll just read it out for those that are online, and I'm keen for you to give your rationale for that. So, so it's about the bird over. Obviously, confirms that number 1, that the Rotokawau Virginia Lake Aviary is to remain open, and 2, includes in the 2023 to 24 annual plan budget $50,000 for immediate remedial works for bird welfare, and request the Chief Executive bring back a report outlining the option for closure in the medium term. So yeah, I'll pass over to you, Jenny, to explain your rationale.
Yep. And I'd like to, I think before we talk about it, we probably need to move it. So I'm happy to move it,
yes,
and I'm sure my colleague across the room, Councillor Charlie, has seconded it. So my priority is the bird welfare, and birds in cages, unless it's for preservation of species, are a thing of the past. Aviaries are similar to zoos, polar bears and the like walking around concrete prisons on a daily basis is not appropriate, and birds unable to fly also is not appropriate. We have a native bird sanctuary on our doorstep, Bushy Park. It is an amazing facility, and it is also free. To think, let's go and see the cockatoos and see if they talk. It's a nice thought, and to go down there and maybe they might even swear at you. Great, that's a good giggle too. However, we've got 4 birds in an area not much bigger than a small bedroom, and that to me is completely inappropriate, and this has been the case for many years as well. Comments being made about a key theme in the consultation about free activities in Whanganui, and I know that free activities are important. I've already mentioned that Bushy Park is free, but is it appropriate that to have free activities for yourself and your children, a whole class of animal birds become captured in an aviary, unable to fly in the way that they were meant to? If you want to see exotic birds, go online, watch a video, see them in their natural habitat. That's where you see exotic birds. You don't go to a cage and watch them. You could say, well, then we could make the aviary bigger so that they could fly further. And that's like saying to us, well, we're going to let you walk, but you can only walk down to the end of your street and back. That's a decent piece of walking. You can walk that far and back. That's a good walk. No, actually, I like to walk mountains and rivers and beaches. You know, birds are meant to fly free. So my recommendation is that first we address the welfare issues, which are the most important. And then the medium-term view is we look at closure, because these birds obviously can't be released. Some of them may need to see out their lives in that aviary. But over time, I think we need to move on from something that is part of our past and close our aviary. Thank you.
Yep, so I'm just going to get to that, so thank you. Now we'll put some, so if you've got questions in relation to this recommendation, so first of all, Councillor Rob.
Yeah. Councillor Jenny's just spoken to the closure. It says that it remains open. How long is it anticipated to remain open?
Request the Chief Executive bring back a report outlining the options for closure. So it will be, that's how we will see our pathway forward.
In other words, at this point in time, we don't know until the report comes back.
So there's 50,000 to be spent. Is that the way I read it? And it could close in the next 3 years. Is that what I read it?
Well, we haven't got a number on it. You've said 3 years, but I confirm that we don't know the timeline for that until the report comes through. Yep. Is that,
Yeah,
that okay?
okay.
Any other questions relating to Councillor Jenny's recommendation? Okay. All right, so we'll move to comments. Councillor Charlie?
Rob was first.
Was he? Okay, right.
No, Charlie.
It looks like, yeah.
Am I going right?
You go first, Charlie.
In my opinion, no animal should be kept in captivity. I went to a zoo when I was 8 years old, and I saw a polar bear there. It was a very sad polar bear. I knew it was wrong, and the polar bear knew it was wrong. It just sat there with it shaking its head in its concrete swimming pool and a big white rock. And I don't see any difference between that polar bear and these birds that are kept in captivity, flying around for our pleasure. So I support this closure in time, because it can't happen straight away, because some of these birds need to be rehomed. Yeah, so I'll support this.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Councillor Rob?
Thank you. If the concern is animal welfare, why doesn't number 1 say the Rotokawau Virginia Lake Aviary is to close? To say that it remains open seems to defeat the whole purpose of the animal welfare argument. And then the resolution is also asking the ratepayer to spend $50,000 on a aviary that could close at any time. This is if there's going to be an argument to close this aviary, that's what the resolution should say. Thank you.
I'm just going to allow Councillor Jenny to respond to that.
Point of clarification, when we were drafting up the thing, I didn't actually see number 1, the Rotokawau aviary is to remain open. So it probably should be to remain open in the short term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we need to move that?
If Charlie agrees,
Charlie?
we're both good.
Yeah, okay. All right, so happy with that then? Okay, so I'm going to move to Councillor Kate.
Thank you.
Comments?
I don't agree with this. I will not support this recommendation. I will not support it for a number of reasons, but I want to make the point that whilst Bushy Park, if you want a free event well, not an event, an activity for children to go and look at, it is not free. You have to get in your car and drive out there. And with the cost of petrol, I know many families who do not go there because it is too expensive. Conversely, I know many families who go to Virginia Lake and look at the Aviary, go to the park, walk around the lake, and it is a really good free family outing. So that's point one. Point two, I am very satisfied with the Chief Executive's response that the animal welfare matters will be attended to in short order. And I would hope that, and I will foreshadow that if this recommendation fails, then I will be putting a recommendation that that is along the line of the officer's recommendations that's in our papers.
Okay, thank you. We do have another another councillor who's also got an alternative if this one fails as well. So, look, I'm going to go to Councillor Michael.
Thank you. This is a better worded motion for closing option 3. So option 3 was given to the public and they declined it. So I cannot support this merely because the 90% of the population did decline the closure. Whether it not be now, 3 years' time, or in 20 years' time, the public want this open. And a second reason why I could not support this is because, as Chief Executive said, the report stipulated that the main bird welfare was in the operational cost. So this would have to be edited to be the 50,000 plus the 150,000 to ensure the bird welfare over a medium term was calculated correctly. But with this bias of closing it in the medium term, I fully understand the councillors' point of views on this, and it is a debate that we can definitely have in the future around animal captivity. But today I'd like to focus on whether or not we close it or we invest in bird welfare. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Glenda.
Thank you. With consideration of the extensive consultation that we had with the public, it was overwhelmingly so that they wanted this to be opened, whether it was option 1 or option 2, it was overwhelming. So considering that, I would feel really uncomfortable completely disregarding that feedback. So I will not be supporting this motion. Thanks.
Okay.
Right, a reply?
Yes, away you go, Councillor Jenny again.
Just in super brief, the popular view isn't necessarily the right view. And normally, where we had a situation like this, I would go with the dominant view. But this is a greater issue than what a few people's opinions are. It is not right to keep birds in cages. It's a thing of the past. So on that basis, option 2 was bird welfare. So there's significant concern in our community about the welfare of the birds. There were a lot of other people who wanted the aviary closed for those very reasons. So I stand by my recommendation that we first instance need to look after bird welfare, and secondly look at, over time, closing the aviary.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Jenny. And I'll just give my perspective on this. Towards the end of last year, I received a phone call from a member of the public who used to work in the Auckland Zoo, and he was a bird expert, supposedly, and he said you can take it or leave it, and it's just a phone call, so who knows what you get. But what he did say at the time, that his own observation and his own view was that the birds' welfare was in question, and I'm not sure whether that conversation. I'd certainly talked to our Chief Executive about that, and following up from that, there was a report. Whether it was related or not, I'm not sure, but certainly that was a sequence of events. And so the question at hand here is, first and foremost, is animal or bird welfare more specifically, and that is what we're trying to address. The cost is another issue, but first and foremost, it's about bird welfare. I am no expert on bird welfare, but certainly there is a perception from some members of our public that having a bird aviary when birds have got wings to fly is something that is important for them. Likewise, we've got other members of our community that want to see this aviary stay open, and so that's the question of cost, but ultimately it comes back to bird welfare, and that's what we need to understand here, that's what's important. So look, any no further questions, no further comments. So I'm going to put the motion on the screen that confirms that the Rotokawau Virginia Lake Aviary is to remain open in the short term. It includes included in the 2023-24 annual plan budget, $50,000 for immediate remedial works for bird welfare, and request the Chief Executive bring back a report outlining the option for closure in the medium term. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is lost. So thank you very much, Councillor Jenny, for that. So we've got another councillor, Councillor Rob, who's got an alternative motion again. This motion is, so I'll read it out for those because I'm conscious that we can see it in the room, but can people see it online? I assume they can. Look, I'll read it out quickly anyway. Confirm that the Rotokawau Virginia Lake Aviary is to remain open, includes the 2023-24 annual plan budget, $50,000 for immediate remedial works, and completing a business case and enclosure design options for Rotokawau Virginia Lake Aviary, up to $150,000 total operating costs, including voluntary staffing, training, feed, veterinary costs for the Rotokawau Virginia Lake Aviary. And 3, request the Chief Executive complete a business case including design options and costs for upgrading the enclosure, and for elected members to consider as part of the 2024-34 long-term plan process. And 4, request the Chief Executive explore fundraising and external co-funding opportunities to offset the costs of the upgrade. So, Councillor Rob, this is your alternative recommendation. Would you like to comment? Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes, I need a. So I'll put that. So you're going to second that, Philippa? Councillor Philippa, thank you. And Councillor Rob, I'll. Okay. Is it clear from the question of clarification of the recommendation? Okay. If you just put the microphone on.
So my question is, I'd like to just understand from one of the officers how it is different from what's in our papers.
One word.
So how this is different is it includes voluntary staffing, and what probably needs to be clarified is whether that is staffing plus voluntary staffing, or whether you're suggesting voluntary staffing only. And if it is voluntary staffing, I would really hesitate against that. We've spoken to other aviaries, including Palmerston North, recently been doing some upgrades, and they would strongly recommend against using voluntary staff. While voluntary staff are great, this is a service that does require training. It requires people being there for set hours, and a level of understanding. And I'm not saying that volunteers are unable to do that, but it's really important that we resource this properly, and that would be officer recommendations, that voluntary can be supplementary to those who have been properly trained. And it's unreasonable, I think, to expect that volunteers will go through the health and safety training and other things that are required. Michael David may want to add to that.
Okay. Yeah. So through you, Worship, I have no cause for concern about this alternative motion so long as the inclusion of voluntary staff doesn't preclude some paid staff. The intention has always been to have a blended model where we have a small number of qualified trained staff, but then also retain the existing cohort of volunteers, because that strikes the right balance, in my view, between getting the right skills and expertise and structure in terms of paid regular hours into the aviary, whilst also maintaining some affordability and continuing to use and value the contribution and the expertise that the volunteers have provided to the Aviary over many years. So as long as it doesn't prohibit the use of paid staff, it's more or less saying what we were going to do anyway.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pass over to Rob soon, Councillor Rob. Okay, of this particular recommendation?
Correct.
Okay.
I was under the interpretation that voluntary staff was as per what we have now. We have 2 volunteers who are actually paid, but they classify themselves as volunteers. They were hired as volunteers. They are volunteers. But they're still paid. So I just want to clarify when you say volunteer, Rob, and
Well, volunteers aren't paid.
okay, so that's non-paid volunteers.
Yeah.
So, through you, Your Worship, if I can clarify, certainly there's no intention to wind back any employment terms and conditions for existing staff. But again, it's not uncommon practice for aviaries to take on unpaid volunteer staff, particularly students that are going through the animal husbandry training course. It's a valuable source of work experience that allows them to pass the qualifications. And if we are operating to a credible standard, then it means that we can open ourselves up to students coming in and getting some work experience, say over the summer, on an unpaid volunteer basis.
Through you, Mayor, and just as a seconder, I would ask the mover to accept a amendment that it would be up to 150,000 total operating costs, including the support of voluntary staffing. So it's quite clear.
Okay.
And if Rob was to accept, I'm asking the mover if he accept that.
Do you accept that, Councillor Rob?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just have a further matter of clarification.
Right, okay. Yeah,
Sorry.
that's fine. That's all good.
And I want to ask the question this way of the Chief Executive. He's just given us his view, but I just want to be clear. Does that preclude, would the way that this recommendation is worded, would that preclude you from taking on any additional staffing? I think I know what the answer is. But
So, through Your Worship, my reading of this is that it is inclusive of voluntary staff, but is not exclusive of paid staff. That's my interpretation. I think it is probably important to ensure we have a common understanding before the resolution is passed.
Yeah.
it will not preclude additional staff. Is that what you're saying?
If you wanted my recommendation to make this a really robust resolution, I would add in including the support of voluntary staff, paid staff, training. That way it's explicit and the resolution will stand alone without having to refer back to the minutes and the recording of this meeting.
Great, thank you. I was just about to suggest something like that because that makes it very explicit then. Right, so yeah, I just need to check with the mover and the seconder that you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Okay.
And I am too.
Okay. Right, so I'm going to go back to Councillor Rob to give you an opportunity to speak to your... We've spoken about it quite a bit already,
Yeah.
because it's really only one change of
Yeah.
the word, one word that's changed, plus a couple more since.
But this is a greater issue than just the use of voluntary staff. This resolution allows the Chief Executive to incur costs of $150,000 total operating costs in addition to what is being spent now. And when we go back to the presentation of John Tarrant, the Bird Society, who there's nobody with a greater interest in the welfare of birds than the Bird Society, and he made it quite clear that there was no need to extend the staffing arrangements of this aviary. In fact, I'll read out his report. He talks about the report. Mr. Roberts' report repeatedly refers to best practice. It is easily quoted and very subjective. a theoretical and idealistic standard of perceived perfection, difficult to achieve and more difficult to maintain. And on staffing levels, he said the justification of employing qualified and experienced full-time staff all day, 7 days a week, to attend 170 birds and keep a public presence is ridiculously excessive. He also said, and it was made quite clear by the person that was managing the aviary up there that we spoke to when we visited that time, that there is no concern about inadequate feeding levels of these birds. So one of the things we don't have to spend a lot more money on is more feed, because it'll be totally wasted. The people who are actually working there made that quite clear. So I guess that why I wanted to add the words voluntary in there is because a specific question that was asked of Mr. Tarrant and Mike Street, who also spoke on it, was whether this extra need could be supplied by voluntary help. And both of them said yes. What Mr. Tarrant said for extra staffing is required. Visitor contact is important. We suggest additional temporary personnel during holiday periods, possibly December to mid-January. School holidays, Easter and Labour weekends. He said in his submission that volunteers could be found to do that. So now that's in there, I'm reasonably satisfied with the resolution, other than the fact that I don't want to see $150,000 added to the operating costs of this aviary. Thank you.
To clarify, I think we may have had an
Mary Andrew, your mic's not on, and it is
Oh.
quite a long way away from you. It's
Right,
quite hard to hear.
okay, good, thank you. I'm just going to pass over to David to clarify. I think there might have been an error. I'm happy for you to disagree, but
Through you, Your Worship, I just wanted to clarify that this resolution is not increasing the budget by $150,000. It is increasing the budget to $150,000. There is already $50,000 in the budget, so it's a net increase of only $100,000.
all right, great. Okay, so I'm going to pass over to Councillor Josh.
Thank you. Yeah, this recommendation is includes a minor addition to the officer recommendation, so I'm going to speak to it in its entirety, if that's okay. Just wanted to start off by acknowledging the submissions that we received from the public, and if I go back to some of the comments that I made when we adopted the consultation document, my view has always been that this investment is not only about enhancing the aviary, but it's about enhancing one of our most iconic premier parks. And my personal feeling reading through the submissions from the public was that they also felt, in the main, that this investment was about increasing the overall experience. Councillor Joblin mentioned families and friends and social groups using that park regularly and frequently, and I think that came through really strongly in the submissions that we received. In terms of the resourcing that we're allocating to this, I am very supportive of it, because I feel that our role here at a governance level is to give the Chief Executive the tools that he and his team need to ensure that we, as best as practically possible, meet modern animal welfare standards. And we know that the aviary has received only a minor level of investment since it was first built in the 1960s or 70s. And I feel that the approach that we've got here around providing an initial level of resourcing plus the development of a business case will enable us to do that responsibly and in a considered manner. The other point that I would make is that number 4, requesting the Chief Executive to explore fundraising and external co-funding opportunities. That's a really positive addition, because if I look at some of the other facilities that we have in Whanganui, past projects and so on, like Majestic Square, for instance, and the Sargent Gallery, those projects have had the ratepayer input decrease because a really large amount of external funding has been sourced, and I'd encourage us to look at, potentially even sourcing sponsorship from a name sponsor, for instance, to ensure that we can reduce the ratepayer input as much as possible. So thank you, and I'm very happy to support this recommendation.
Great, thank you. Councillor Josh, Councillor Ross.
Personally speaking, I'm not a fan of animals in enclosures unless it's a breeding program, and specifically endangered species. However, I know that public view is very clear of what the public wants. They got what they wanted when we talked about the gassing of dogs in boxes, and we went for a more humane way of dealing with that. The public were very adamant about a better dog pound. They got that. The public was adamant about mosquito point. They got that, but it backfired in the long run. This is what the ratepayer is asking for. My minor point, whilst acknowledging what the public wants, and I will support that, whichever way the motion goes in favour of immediate welfare, is that the very minimum, when I track social media, and I'm talking about Facebook separate to submissions, there was a lot of traffic, but it was all sentimental. I get that. Children, grandchildren, visitors, and so on, the value of the park, the other things at the reserve, I get all that. I suppose my point is a request that whatever path we go down other than closure, that we start gathering data, that we capture how many are visiting, when are they visiting, where are they from potentially. There is no data other than a public viewpoint that this is essential to as part of the visitor experience within or visitors coming to Whanganui. I believe immediately we need to include, apart from bird welfare, data capture. The second part to that is we're in a tough rating year, and a huge focus has been on this aviary. Massive. From the moment we saw the headline, is the aviary doomed? Massive amounts of time has gone in. Significant increase in submissions, mainly about the aviary, which is great for public engagement. Hamilton's got aviaries, upgrade. Hastings is upgrading. I believe New Plymouth has done some upgrading. Palmerston North has done some upgrading. Despite my personal view, the public is still very keen on birds in cages, and I don't want to go up against that, but I do, repeating myself, I do want to see the data, because next year we're going into, I believe, personally, another challenging rating year, and that data will be important to me when I look at cost to the ratepayer to maintain services in a broader picture, and I believe this will come back to visit us next year as on that list of considerations, and the data will be needed to assist in my considerations.
Thank you. So Councillor Michael.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. This has been a great turnaround from the first time that this was brought to our attention, and I told you all the stories of the first time I stepped foot in that aviary, and my kids, and I'm sure, as long as I'm a councillor, my grandkids will be seeing that aviary. 90% plus online. I'm talking 800 people responded to my call to action to save our birds. Because this is not the first time this council has come for the birds. They seem to use this as an example of seem to use an example as something that's easy to look at. It was $20,000 to $50,000 of savings. We actually used this, and we got so structured on this that we forgot about the other hundreds and thousands of dollars that we started discussing in February. So I'm glad this is over. I'm glad that only did 90% of social media support me on this motion, but also 90% of the submissions did as well. So thank you for submitting and supporting this motion. Thank you for seeing sense. What I like to also state is thank you to the officers, because the officers said $400,000 and the majority of people said, nah, we don't need that. And even some quotes that came into my inbox were along the lines of $20,000 to $40,000. So $50,000 seems more than appropriate for immediate action. We are fully aware when you reconcile the report that operational costs do cost more money. To my colleague, I totally understand the $150,000 is a large number. It is $100,000 more. And $100,000, again, is a large number, but it is also up to. And I would like to think, and I'm pretty sure I know these officers well enough now, is they will not spend that unless they have to. So I'm hoping not to see that number rise up. What I would say, though, is it is a council-owned thing, right? And that comes with bureaucracy, that comes with central regulations, that comes with things that make no sense. One of the items on the list said there wasn't a piece of paper that said when they were fed. That's administration. Administration costs money. Administration gets data, which means we have to audit it, which means further costs. So there is always going to be more costs towards running an Aviary as a council than if I was to run my own Aviary. So I understand that. So I thank you to the officers for bringing that down. I think $50,000 in repairs makes total sense, and $150,000 up to total expenditure of total operations makes sense as well. I also like to say thank you to the staff, people who support the staff. I've had at least 100 stories of how amazing those staff are, who started off as volunteers, who do not work at the living wage, and are enjoying what they do. And I really appreciate that. So thank you for the volunteers and that.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap up pretty soon, Michael. I mean, no,
5 minutes.
What's that? 5? Okay, well, yeah. I'm just wrapping
3.5
up,
minutes, but all right. No, I'll stop there, Mayor Andrew. Thank you. I'm happy.
I've given you some time because you've been passionate for this for a long time, and you've been very active. So,
yeah, so I will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
So, no, I appreciate it. I'm just saying thank you for your passion for this particular area. So we have spent quite a bit of time on the Aviary. We expected to. That's why it's by itself. But I do want to just give a quick word to Councillor Philippa, and then close off with Councillor Jenny, and that'll be it.
Thank you. Yes, in brief, I support these resolutions. I don't agree this is the biggest issue in our annual plan by any means, but but the people have spoken. This is something very special to Whanganui. It's important we look after the welfare of our birds, the welfare of our community, and obviously the visitor, has a real visitor attraction, being a premier park. I think that, basically, I just wanted to say that, the people have spoken. We're talking about just 0.7% of actual operating costs in this annual plan with that 50,000, and up to, and that is not a target, of 150,000 of capital expenditure, which is 0.01% in this annual plan. So, yeah, I support. Thank you to the staff. Thank you to the submitters. Excellent recommendations. Really, Resolution 4 about exploring fundraising, external co-funding, and obviously the professional staff with the support of volunteers. I think this could be a real win-win for our community and council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jenny.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Yes, this is certainly not the biggest issue in Whanganui. I think the biggest issue is obviously the inequitable increase in rates that we're experiencing across our community in the coming year, and that's probably where the biggest part of our attention should lie. However, when we go back to this particular matter, for me it is a moral choice, and on that basis I do hope that my colleagues' grandchildren will not be visiting the aviary. But I do remind you of approximately, and I don't know how many years ago it was, maybe it was about 7 years ago when we sat around this table. One of my colleagues was on this side and I was on the other side of the room, and we voted for the H. And the popular view in Whanganui at that time was not to put the H back, and the right decision was to do so, to put the H back in Whanganui where it belonged. And that is the final vote that succeeded. So sometimes the popular view isn't the right view. Sometimes we need to make a moral choice, and that's what I've done today. And on that basis, I won't be supporting this resolution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've also, don't want to forget, we've got Councillor Peter Oscom on the online. He's no longer, but he has asked me to pass on some comments if he dropped out, and that is, I'm not going to read out everything here, but he wants to put the Aviary in the context of the big picture, that we've got enough financial challenges right now in the coming years, and that we should consider the capital outlay and ongoing operational costs as well. And he's also said that I appeal to your well-demonstrated sense of compassion on other issues. Please vote along with me and close the Aviary. So that's where that particular, his comment is going. From my own perspective, just finally to wrap it up, I'm going to line number 4, which is around fundraising and external co-funding, and also to Councillor Josh's comment before. I've had a number of people in our community that are very willing to put their hand up to volunteer to rebuild this facility, and so that's just that's the sense of people who are strong advocates of the Aviary, but also understand the capital and operational cost limitations and financial burden our community is facing as well. So, and we've done it with many other projects: the Jubilee Stadium, the War Memorial, Majestic Square, and countless other ones as well. So why not this one? But that's obviously a subject to come. So I'm going to, there's no further comments, so I'll put the motion on the screen. I'm not going to read it out because we're well acquainted with it, and it should be online for those that can see it. So all those in favour? Right. Against? I've got 2. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much.
On the comments that you made about the rate impact, please. If you look on the right-hand side there, 150,000 from CapEx loan funded, 50,000 rate funded. If you look at the resolution, the 150,000 is for operating costs, voluntary staffing, training. That doesn't seem to me to be something that you finance through loan funding.
This is a change to the draft budget that we put out to the public. So for the capital cost, or for the 50k for remedial works in the business case, we are loan funding that, and that's gone down from 150,000 capex to 50,000 capex, which has moved the rates by 0.1% down. And same with the operating costs. We had in the draft budget 200,000. That's going down to 150, which means there's a 50k reduction in operating costs, and operating costs are rate funded.
That's different. That's the opposite to what the comment is on that sheet, isn't it?
No, I don't believe so.
It says 150,000 capex loan funded, and the 150 you're talking about is OPEX.
Sorry, you're reading that wrong. The 150 capex relates to the first bullet point of 50,000 for immediate remedial works. That's the 50,000 of capex to do remedial works and your business case. That's gone down from 200 down to 150. That's the 150 minus of capex. And
so it was 200 and now it's now 50.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so look, what we'll do is we're just going to take a 5 minutes break. Any other clarifications of the council officer, we'll take those offline. the submissions one by one. But I'm hoping that it will be relatively quick. We spent a lot of time on the Aviary, and that we've got a couple of changes to recommendations here, but hopefully it should be smooth running. There's also, I remind you that we've had a number of discussions and workshops and commentary on other matters as well, including the cemetery water feature, and there's probably some other ones in there as well. So I don't want to labour it too much, but unless there's a particular change of sentiment or new information, I'm keen to keep this cranking, and we're due to finish at 1. So moving into cuts and deferrals, we're not going to have officer information or reports for these. We're just going to go straight into questions. Yeah, sorry, because the information is already available in the report. Thanks, Elise. So the first item is that sport... hang on. Sorry, I need to look at the screen. Sport Whanganui Sport and Recreation contract, that the Council A confirms the removal of 45,000 from the 23-24 budget for implementation of the open spaces and physical activity strategy, and B, confirms that 45,000 of unspent funds for the implementation of the open spaces and physical activity strategy at 30 June 2023 are carried forward to the 23-24 through the carryover process. Okay, so it's been put forward by Councillor Kate. So, Philippa, you're happy to second that, Councillor? Okay, great. Thank you. So we're going to, would you like to speak to this?
I will speak very briefly to it, if I may. Thank you. I think what this recommendation is about is ensuring that we adequately resource the implementation of the sport, open spaces and physical activity strategy. We had 60,000 in there, we had 45,000 carry forward. So what this recommendation will do is ensure that we have 60,000 budgeted to be spent on the implementation of that strategy for this year. And that's very consistent with the themes that came through the submissions process about the importance of outdoor recreation. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. So, yeah, and that 45,000 and 45 and A and B just happen to be the same amount. So, Councillor Philippa.
Yeah, and look, I'd just like to to promote, I guess, to my colleagues supporting that. There wasn't as such a contract for $60,000, but there was up to $60,000 spent in the current year. I think there was a $40,000, basically there's a $45,000 carry over of that work, and really what we're looking to do is to confirm that unspent money in the current year forward into the 2023 annual plan around such a key important area of sport, recreation and activity, and in particular that we can actually get some implementation of the open spaces and physical activity strategy, which is due to have action plan come forward to Council in July, and has been, I guess, driven and monitored by the Sport and Recreation Working Group, which I chair. So I just would appreciate and strongly look for the endorsement of councillors for basically just using unspent money from our current year forward to the next year in such a key area, rather than say, basically we've got no money in that area, so how are we going to do anything? Thank you.
Right, thank you, Philippa. So, any other questions or comments in regard to this particular matter? Councillor, I've just shut the screen off. Thank you. Thanks, Anna. Councillor Helen.
Thank you. So there's a slight amendment here from what was on our papers, which confirms the removal of 60,000. It's now reduced to 45,000. So that's a $15,000 difference being suggested here today, which I understand would be about an additional 0.02% on rates, on top of what we were already talking about. So I'm just asking, what are we getting for that extra $15,000 really, that we weren't getting?
Yeah, I'll pass over to David. Probably not much, but
So, through you, Your Worship, first point I would make is just in terms of the carry forward, I think just to confirm for your comfort that that was the officer's original intention anyway, so really comfortable with that. In terms of what we're getting for the money, I think the intention of, without speaking on behalf of the elected member that's moved this alternative motion, is to maintain the status quo of the existing budget at a gross of $60,000. Again, I suppose referring back to the previous conversation, that original $60,000 was probably set for a reason based on a work program to implement the strategy. So we are just defaulting to the original plan, but it's not a target to be aimed for. Just because it's budgeted for, if we can deliver the work program for less, then we will aim to do so.
great, thank you. Councillor Michael.
Yes, I'd like to say that we have a really strong sport to recreational committee structure. We've got a really amazing team around this table in a structure that is set up for economical and social value for the highest relative demand. So, because of that, I am always going to have a slight bias for not giving any budget to anything, because we know that we'll spend the money where there is the biggest value relative to other valuable items. We have 45,000 already in there. I support the fact that the 45,000 unspent funds are being carried forward. Makes total sense. Let's maximize that value and show if we actually do need more before we start allocating more funds and start increasing rates unjustifiably. Lots of other areas have gone through pain, and I feel like just flicking 15,000 back into the budget is kind of like a, here you go, hope you're happy, rather than justifying the need for it. Thank you.
Right, thank you. So there's no further comments, and actually, we're late run from Councillor Helen.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So we're in comments. Yeah, look, I am reluctant to support bringing back in 15,000, and it sounds like it's penny pinching, and I really do value sport in rec. But we've got further increases that are signalled from what we were planning, and it's starting to creep up from the 8.2 to the 8.3, and every little bit we add in is getting there, and that's not what our ratepayers need and want right now. And whether the staff can find further savings or not is irrelevant, because we're actually going to be rating for it. So I'm really concerned. We all are going to have to take a bit of pain. I agree with Michael. You know, let's maximise what we can out of the money that we have. But this is such a tough year, and next year it's just going to be tougher. We have to bite some bullets. So that's my view, as tough as it is. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Kate.
I won't write a reply when everybody's finished, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine, no problem. Yep. Councillor Philippa. Okay. Councillor Rob.
Are we speaking to it, or is it questions?
It's just speaking to it,
Okay.
or questions.
Yeah.
We can probably do both at the moment.
Thank you. I think that Council needs to take into consideration that there is already a $50,000 reduction in the sport and recreational area in the facilities budget. Previously, there was $100,000 put aside each year for a facilities budget, and that's been reduced in this annual plan to $50,000. That money has been very well spent in the past, and I think that we should take that into consideration with this reduction. I think this is the maximum reduction that can be incurred in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. And to wrap up, Councillor
Thank you.
Kate.
Very briefly, there is no point having strategies if we do not resource those strategies to be implemented. This is really important stuff. This is not about us feeling the pain. This is about our community, our children, who need to be encouraged and shown how to engage with in physical activity.
Thank you. So I'm going to close off comments now and put the motion on the screen, first of all with A and then B. So I'm going to vote on A first. So confirms the removal of 45,000 from the 23-24 budget for implementation of the open spaces and physical activity strategy. So all those in favour? All those against? Councillor Jenny, Councillor Michael and Councillor Helen. So the motion is carried. That's item A. Item B confirms that 45,000 of unspent funds for the implementation of the open spaces and physical activity strategy for 30 June are carried forward to 23-24 through the carryover process. All those in favour? All those against? Item is carried. Thank you. So we're going to move on to 3. Number 3, which is climate change actions. Elise, Elise is going to speak to this briefly.
I'll just speak very briefly to this. There are notes in the reports. When officers were asked to look for savings, as has been indicated, we looked across everything, and that included the climate budget. The full climate budget we had was 200,000 per year, and that is for all activities, mitigation and adaptation. When we were asked what was committed for next year, 100,000 is fully committed for the Community Climate Action Fund, which is soon to open in July. So that funding was not able to be reduced. So we did offer the 100,000 up, which was agreed. However, we've re-looked at everything and the submissions, which are obviously quite strong in terms of climate being a priority, and we do think there is a need to reinstate 50,000 in the budget to enable work on adaptation, which would enable us to do some risk and threat assessment work to lead into our long-term plan. So this is council work that we do think would be helpful. While it is something that could potentially be pushed out further, we do think this is work that is important. I also note we do have funding available through the Better Off funding, but none of those projects would explicitly cover this risk assessment work. So that is the officer recommendation.
Great, thank you, Elise. So we're going to have some questions. First, Councillor Josh.
Comment, sorry, not a question.
Any questions in regard to this matter? Clarifications? If not? Yes. No, okay. Councillor Helen.
Yeah, thanks, Elise. So you made a mention there of there is some funding available through the Better Off funding, but this wouldn't be part of that. So can you clarify that statement, please?
Yes, so I have been told there is 400,000 available, particularly for work with Mayoral. So this work would be a full risk assessment for the whole district. So while it would pick up and include on those particular risks, it would not be comprehensive. David may want to speak further as well to it.
Through you, Madam Chair. Sorry. Through your worship, the Mayor.
Promotion.
I need to put on a deep voice to make sure.
Damn, that's thrown me. Through you, worship, the Better Off funding has provided some additional external funding that's not coming from our ratepayers. The scope of that funding overlaps with the scope of our climate action plans. So really officers are saying we want to use that third-party funding before we call on our ratepayers funding. As a result, we're comfortable you can reduce the budget a little bit without foregoing getting any of the work done that we'd originally planned.
Thank you, but it sounds like that this was in another area, so based on our ratepayer feedback, instead of not proceeding with $100,000 worth of this, we would only not proceed with 50,000. I recall that part of the rationale for us reducing the budget down by 100,000 was actually we didn't have the people resource to actually further a lot of the work. That was the primary thing, because we all wanted climate action. So can you explain now why what difference is 50,000? You know, how we can now do that work? Is that bringing in a consultant or something, or what's happening?
Yes, and that would probably be how we'd proceed. So we'd use that 50,000 to hire a consultant to carry out the specific piece of work, which we believe is important for the district and would be really valuable information leading into our long-term plan. And when we were initially asked for the budget cuts, that wasn't a piece of work that was on our work plan at that time. So that has since come onto the work plan since February, March.
Okay. And this extra 50,000 would increase what we've proposed in our rates by 0.075%, from what I've gathered from here. Yeah, thank you very much.
Correct.
Great. Councillor Michael, you have a question?
Comment,
okay, same with Josh. Right, so no further questions. I propose that we move the recommendation on the screen, and I move what's on the screen. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Josh. Thank you. So comments, Councillor Josh, first comment.
Thank you. Yes, very, very briefly from...
Sorry. Okay. Councillor Josh, sorry, back to you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, just very briefly from me, my understanding is that at a regional level, a risk assessment has been completed or is in the very near stages of completion, but that it hasn't yet been localised for our district. And so for me, you know, we have a climate change strategy. It seems prudent that in the lead up to the long-term plan, we do the work to properly understand where the key pinch points are for us in terms of both adaptation and mitigation throughout the district. And I imagine it would be widespread, far-reaching, looking at roading, looking at slippages, looking at the impacts of flooding, weather, and coastal implications, housing, and so on. And we just need this. We can't resource a strategy, not understand what the implications are for our district, and plan appropriately. We need to have that understanding before we put an a long-term action plan in place. So very supportive of this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. That's it. Any other comments regarding item A? Oh, Michael, sorry, you are on my screen, yes.
I'm easily forgettable, don't worry. I understand public's concern here. I understand why it came up in the report. I also go back to one of my colleagues who said the public's not always correct. And it's normally because they don't have all the information. We look like we're removing climate change. We're climate change deniers, but we're not. We're just being prudent people with a budget. Just because I give you $200,000 to the people across the room from me does not mean you will provide outcomes. It just means I'll be rating people for that $200,000. So we very prudently removed as much as we possibly could on what wasn't planned. We've now had confirmation that it's still not planned, and a further amount of money will be spent on consultants, which could be from outside of our region. So no one here is going to benefit. We may have another report to deliberate in a few months' time. Whereas I'd like to see proper fiscal responsibility that delivers economical and social value relative, and you'll hear me say it again and again and again, relative to everything else we do. So therefore, I cannot support putting more money back into this. There was not enough people to say this is a popularity issue. It just seems like people who have misunderstood what this actually is. We're removing items in the budget to reduce your rates. We were not going to spend it anyway. It's most likely deferred, and let's get a proper business case together on things we are going to spend money on, which will provide better mitigation and adaptation strategies for all. Thank you.
Right, thank you. So no further comments on this, so I'm going to put the motion on the screen, item A, that Council reinstates the 50,000 into the 23-24 budget for climate change to enable further work on climate change risk assessment for the district. All those in favour? Right. All those against? Got Councillor Helen, Councillor Charlie and Councillor Michael. Motion is carried. Item B, relating to climate change actions, confirms that reduction of 200,000 in the 23-24 budget for coastal plan and reconsiders this funding through the long-term plan 2024 to 34. So any questions in regard to this matter, this item? Councillor Jenny and Councillor Ross.
I should have perhaps responded to this one earlier on when we were talking about revisions to any of the recommendations. So, I mean, I at this late hour proposed that confirms the deferral of 200,000. I think the message that I want to leave with that is that this is being deferred to the long-term plan, and it could be semantics because everything in the long-term plan is up for dibs, everything. But I want to make it clear that this isn't a reduction or a removal of the funding, it's just being deferred to the long-term plan.
Okay, I'm happy to accept that. And Josh, you're the seconder of this, so Councillor Josh, you're happy to accept that as well? I mean, ultimately it'll be up for grabs again. We could continue to defer it, but who knows? Yeah. Okay, thanks, Jenny. And Councillor Ross.
Yeah, I support the slight amendment, which is where I was heading. But my other point too is for the public. When you're deferring now, potentially deferring $200,000, which is a large amount of money in anybody's bookkeeping, and we know there's climate change, and we know I'm getting feedback from people about why haven't we done this or that yet on the coastal plan, and I'm not even sure if they've read the document because it's quite an extensive document. I think for the benefit of the public, we should be able to operationally, if that's the right word, explain here why we are potentially deferring $200,000 out of that plan. Why are we dropping that amount? I think the public needs to know that, why we're considering that amount.
Okay. Councillor Jenny, looks like you want to respond to that?
Yeah, our CE may wish to respond as well, but I think the reason that we're doing this is because in the coming financial year, we already have better off funding of $330, whatever it is, $1,000, and we're not going to actually do the physical work. So we're not going to be able to achieve the physical works. Therefore, we should take the money out of the budget and move it to the next year. So it's not taking it away, and that's why I've asked for that word deferral. We just can't get the physical works done. Therefore, we move it to the next year rather than rate our people for it.
Okay. Elise would like to respond to.
Also, exactly as Jenny said, we have carryover money and we have sufficient funding for the coming year to do what we plan to do. So we have deemed that there is sufficient funding available through different sources for this.
Okay. So finished there.
Well, just one minor thing.
Sure. Yeah.
It's more to do with. It's to do with this, but also minute taking. I've experienced on some boards that sometimes when a motion is passed, there will be a small. Sometimes when a motion is passed, or a resolution, I should say, a board will request that a small rationale be entered into the record. I'm simply flagging now that there are times where matters are of such high public interest that despite it being recorded on camera, we can look at case by case the potential for elected members to ask that a small rationale be added into the minutes on an item.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask Anna, did you want to speak to that?
So in this instance, with the because the recommendation has been amended, there will be a slight rationale in the minutes explaining that. But in general sense, if the officer recommendation stays the same, then we wouldn't put rationale too much. Most of it should be in the report itself. But if new information came to light, or there was something of quite high importance, we could do that. But it's usually as a trigger of an officer recommendation being changed.
Okay. Councillor Kate?
I just want to speak to it if you've
Sure.
moved out of questions.
Yes. Well, I'll move out. I'll move out of questions, but we've got a mover. So, yep. Comments.
Thank you. I think this is a very good amendment because it makes clear that council is not backing away from this work program. It is simply getting in order the work and the funding in the right years and the right budgets. But the message is very strong in that council is not backing away from this work. Thank you.
Great. All right. So no further comments. So we'll move. I'll put the motion on the screen as I read out before, with the one change there with the word deferral. So all those in favour? Against? Items carried. Thank you very much. Item C confirms the reduction of $1 million in the 23-24 budget for solar initiatives. So can I have a... Oh, already, yeah, okay, that's already...
Can we do the same thing, please, with the word reduction change to the bill?
Okay, so you're... Can see. I'll ask Michael, so you want... So just on the microphone now. So you'd like to...
So for C, confirms the deferral of $1 million for the 2023-24 sort of budget, because it could come in at the end. No way, it doesn't work actually. Because it's a timeline.
I don't think that...
I just want to be very clear that we're not removing it because we're not doing it. We are deferring it because we do not have the infrastructure ready to go in this financial year.
Can I ask another question of clarification, please?
Sure.
It's a question for either Elise or David. My understanding was that the reason that this was a reduction rather than a deferral was because the resourcing had been allocated in the long-term plan, but there had been no work done around any kind of strategy or I guess commitment to actually doing the work. It was just money that was sitting there, as opposed to the money for the coastal plan, which actually already had a lot of work done around it already. Is that correct?
Yes, more or less correct. So, as you said, the money was earmarked. However, when we went and did scoping work for it, the scoping work made it clear that this was not a high-impact climate change activity for council. We are still pursuing solar for a couple of facilities for the library and for the museum, which are both open 7 days a week, and that's a critical factor for solar to be economically efficient. So at this time, we don't believe it's the right activity as far as our climate change program goes, but we will be bringing back, as has already been mentioned, a full review of the climate change work through the long-term plan process.
Thank you. Did you want to say something, David?
So through you, Your Worship the Mayor, get it right this time. I understand that the word deferral sends a clearer signal to our community around not removing the commitment to some of these initiatives. But I would probably advise that you're kind of getting into the territory of semantics as far as the substance of the resolution. We are reducing this year's budget. The intention is to defer that funding and re-budget it as part of the long-term plan, but from a mechanics point of view, just simply changing the word to deferral doesn't automatically put it back in the long-term plan, and you will still have to go through the full process to reaffirm the commitment to that budgeting, rebudgeting. So I would maybe suggest that the change in terms of the substance of the resolution is inconsequential. It may be more appropriate that we use our comms and media channels to communicate the intent to our community rather than doing it through the resolution.
Great, thank you. So any other comments for item C? Questions or comments? We've had some clarifications on that. Any other clarifications or questions?
I would.
Okay. So no further questions. So I will move to comments then. Yep.
Thank you. One of the things that concerns me about the climate change issue is greenwashing. You know, and so many people talk about you've got to do something about climate change, but can't put anything to that comment about what you should do. You know, I mean, it's really in the past we've gone out and asked the public for this and really come back with nothing. Now, this initiative here is a classic case of greenwashing. Spending money on solar energy in terms of climate change is a non-issue. You know, if you take the world production of energy, the average from non-renewable resources in the world is 16%. In New Zealand, it is 92% from renewable resources. That's what the world effort is going towards, switching away from coal-fired energy production into renewable resources. We have got it. We're one of the best in the world. So the logic for doing this as a climate change initiative just doesn't stack up. There may be savings in operating costs, but that hasn't been proven either. So I'm quite actually pleased to see this deferred, because as I said before, this is just greenwashing. Thank you.
It's been reduced, not deferred. So, Councillor Michael.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Yeah, I kind of agree with my colleague here. It's not a climate change activity. What it is a very mathematically proven system for civil defence, for money in the bank, and I provide that to the chair of the Aspirations Committee and to our CE and to our mayor, the calculations of using solar power in Whanganui and how we can maximise, reduce our operational costs and make it a return. Even though we get cheap electric, but we do get very cheap debts, we can actually get a very large decrease in our operational spends. And also it is based upon our vision for Whanganui, which is local supporting locals, not being reliant on external centralised forces that can interfere with our way of life. I fully support solar, not from a climate change point of view, but from a mathematical, local, supporting local point of view. And if that helps climate change, fantastic. But I support this because we cannot get this up and running this year. But I will be on to it next year.
Right, thank you. So there's no further comments on this. I'm going to put the motion on the screen. Item C confirms the reduction of $1 million in the 23-24 budget for solar initiatives. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? Item is carried. The motion is carried. Thank you. So we're going to move to item 8. I'm conscious that Councillor Glenda will need to be gone by 1. So the cemetery water feature, and I understand you've got like to comment on that. But do we have any information on this from an officer perspective, or it's just as per the report?
You'll remember we had a very robust discussion about this at the strategy and policy meeting, and a reminder that when we talked to this, we also mentioned that the community is in support of fundraising for this. So we're currently pursuing that as well. But otherwise, no further comments or no changes since our last discussion on this.
Okay, so are there any questions or clarifications required of this particular item. I'm just going to bundle A and B together, so just in general. So, okay. Got Councillor Kate who's moved it and Councillor Charlie to second that. So any comments? Councillor Glenda.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be supporting this this motion here. I think that it's a great feature. It'll be a great feature for the cemetery, not only for the community that need to use it for scattering cremated ashes, but for everybody actually. And up to $20,000 for a initial concept to get a good, adequate budget for the construction, I think is very prudent way of using funds. So thank you. I look forward to seeing it up and running soon.
Thank you. Councillor Kate.
Thank you. This recommendation is part of the culmination, I think, of a very good, inclusive, diverse process in terms of reviewing the cemeteries and crematoria policy. And I think it's great that Council, well, I hope that Council supports this, because it is all about being inclusive, and it's about welcoming people to Whanganui who will live here and eventually die. It will give them an opportunity to bury, well, or to dispose of the ashes in a way that's wholly in keeping with their culture, and I think it's great. So really invite you all to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's a no-brainer. Recently we had a submission on the cemeteries and crematoria bylaw, and as a result of submitter, we clarified a little bit more about the process of natural burials as an option to standard burials. This is just another option that will appeal to another segment of our community who do not want to be who wish to spread their ashes in water but do not wish to offend another cultural understanding. This will allow a way around respecting another culture's views on the taonga of the water. So I don't see it as a problem. I just see it as another way of giving people options when they pass.
Right, I'm conscious that we've limited time, but there's a couple more people that want to comment on this. Unless, we'll keep it pretty brief, but unless there's anything to the contrary, I'm keen to just keep this moving. So, Councillor Heller.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I'm sorry, but a question, because we seem to be moving straight into comments and we're not time for questions. So I do have a question. What was the total budget for this facility?
So the total budget is unknown, because this is something that has not been done before in New Zealand, and the reason why we're putting up the 20,000 is for us to do the initial scoping work and the preparatory work, as well as fully cost the budget, and then as per the resolutions at strategy and policy, that full budget will come back to council before you agree to go forward.
So we hadn't put anything in?
It's unknown because it is something, there is no prototype for this. So we're wanting to give ourselves sufficient money to do the work properly, rather than launch into something without knowing exactly what we're launching into.
Thanks, Q. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Rob.
Yes, well, as I raised at the committee when this was spoken about, I personally can't vote in favour of this because, as Councillor Helen has just said, there's no budget for the capital works and no idea of how much it might cost. What I am pleased about is that B, where it says that community funding may be available to fund this design work for the feature. I would suggest that the community funding would be available to fund the whole project. And I look back at, I raised before about the Majestic Square one, where the water feature there was fully funded by the Arthur Williams Leedstown Trust. And I would think, I'd be very confident that in this community there would be a community group or a business that would fund a feature like this. That would, like it did in Majestic Square, include the design work as well. I think that we just haven't explored that at this point in time, and that it's premature to go and spend 20,000 on a design without any idea of how much it might cost.
Thank you. Councillor Josh.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I just want to respond to some of the previous comments and just highlight that this issue has been well traversed in the new project management approach promoted by the Chief Executive and the management team. This is about spending money up front so that we know with more certainty what needs to be budgeted further down the track. I think it's a prudent and good process, and really it's no different to other pieces of work that we've done in the past, feasibility studies and so on, to inform the budget that is required for a capital project. So it's utterly logical to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Last comment from Councillor Philippa.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I support Resolution 1. It may be late in the process, but I wonder with the mover and seconder, consider an amendment to be that could be along the lines, notes the community funding may be available to co-fund the cemetery water feature project, full stop. Because I think, I think that is more appropriate. It's quite possible, and I just am asking if the mover and seconder would.
Okay, Councillor Kate and Councillor Charlie, happy with that? Great, thank you.
As long as everybody votes for it.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Good pick up. So, finally, I mean, as we see in our community a far more diverse society these days, and I think, we're call it leading edge. We're trailblazers. We're front-footed. We're the first in, I think, New Zealand to consider this. And so there will be a bit of uncertainty, and I think it's great that we can acknowledge a diverse group in our community to work with them, to partner with them to make this happen. And it's about also being inclusive, so diversity and being inclusive of them. So I will, no further comments, I'll put the motion on the screen with that slight change with item A and B. All those in favour? Right. All those against? Councillor Rob. So motion is carried. Thank you. So we're going back up to item 4 for those that have it on there, accessible playgrounds. So there it is. I'm going to actually just slow down a bit for questions, and I'll have to be very quick on them. That Council confirms the deferral of accessible playgrounds funding for 23-24 for reconsideration at the long-term plan 24-20 to 34. I assume there's no officer information, so any questions on this? We do. We've got quite a few, so glad I paused for that one. So, Councillor Josh.
Thank you. Probably a question best directed towards our parks manager, and it's just around whether or not there's any scope for some of this work, preparation work, I guess, to be done as part of the open spaces and physical activity strategy. That's a yes. Fantastic. That's all I need. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Kate.
My understanding is that, like other items we've had in front of us today, we didn't have the work ready to spend the money. So that's what this is about. This is not about saying we're not going to do accessible playgrounds. It's about saying let's the work and the planning catch up with the spending the money so that we make the best possible choice. Yep. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Philippa.
I think my question, with the reply that Councillor Chandula Mackay got, I'm just wondering if we could consider a resolution slightly different. That's really suggesting that that something around that deferral may be possible, but that it is considered with the funding and the open spaces physical activity strategy and the Sport and Recreation Facilities Fund, this project I guess I'm just trying to get away that we're completely deferring it. And I wonder if the Chief Executive could help me here with...
So, through you, Your Worship, the intention here is that we defer the funding because we're simply not ready. We haven't scoped the project or whatever it is that we would spend that funding on. So let's not raid our community until we're in a position where we can. We have set up a business case process. We've got the new aspirations committee process as well to start considering business cases and putting in place resource so that we can plan our projects more thoroughly up front. So I'm confident that we can progress this between now and the adoption of the LTP so that we can bring back a properly scoped case for a project so you know what you're going to spend the money on. You can have a bit more confidence in the budget that have been set, and you can know that the resources in place so that we can follow through and deliver when we put it into our work program. I don't think you need to amend the resolution to achieve that. It is absolutely our intention to do that for all projects that we put forward for the next long-term plan, this one included.
Thank you. Okay, we've got Councillor Kate happy to move it, and anyone, Councillor Josh second. So any comments on this particular item? Councillor Philippa.
Yeah, I mean, I will support this resolution with the answer the Chief Executive have given, but my understanding is Whanganui we have no accessible playground at present. So, we have people with disabilities who are, significantly affected by that. It has been was on the previous Sport and Recreation Group work plan as such, and but I will, I think what's important is that what we hear is with the open places and spaces and places of physical activity strategy, with the Sport and Recreation Working Group, with the Aspirations Committee, the work can be done to lead up to us to be able to really make a difference for the disability community early on in our long-term plan next year.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just reinforce what Councillor Philippa just said, and also the previous discussion around diversity and inclusion. We have, I attended a community meeting the other day. 25% of our New Zealand population have a disability of some kind. So the fact that something like this is in here is it should be, and it is. It's great, but it recognises that we have a diverse community that is not just race, but also it's about being we've got people that need accessibility facilities as well. So with that in mind, I no further comments. I'll put the motion on the screen. All those in favour? Against? Great, thank you. Next item, item 5 on our spreadsheet is heritage building grants. That the council confirms a reduction of $100,000 in the 23-24 budget for heritage building preservation grants. Any information from the officers for this? No? Okay, it's all in the report. So any questions in relation to this item? Okay, going on. So I move the motion on the screen that the council confirms the reduction of $100,000 in the budget for heritage buildings. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Charlie, thank you. Any comments on this particular item? Councillor Josh.
Yeah, very briefly from me, I'm going to hold my nose and vote for this, given the pressure we're under this year, but I would, in the long term, hate to see any kind of sustained reduction in our support for the preservation of heritage buildings, and I'd make the same comments in line with the reduction in the funding for the town centre regeneration strategy. This funding is there, or has been there, to support strategies that this council has adopted and resourced in the past, and in future, particularly as part of the LTP process, I would like to see some of this reinstated. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Helen.
Thank you. Very briefly, look, obviously heritage is close to my heart, and I hate to cut a budget like this. but it is tough times for our community. The positive side is we still have $150,000 in the budget. So it's not all gone. So that's, I'm still positive, and our community should be positive, so that fund will still be available. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a reduction. And my only comment would be, for me, heritage is one of our key points of difference for Whanganui, and the fact that we are reducing it but still have something in the budget is just to reinforce what Councillor Houghton said, is that it's still there, so great. So no further comments. Put the motion on the screen as it says. All those in favour? Against? Motion's carried. Thank you. Next item, now move to new funding requests. Next item is Bushy Park Tarapuruhi Trust, that the council refers the Bushy Park Tarapuruhi Trust request for $50,000 annually to the community contracts process for 23-24, and refers ongoing funding to the Aspirations and Projects Committee through the business case process for the long-term plan 24 to 34. So are there any, I assume no officers report? Okay, straight to questions then. Any questions of clarification or questions full stop? Councillor Ross.
One question. When it says refers ongoing funding, I'm assuming that means there is some funding currently going on, and that ended this year. That's the last year of a... Let me start again. I need to ask the CE, if I'm referring to the correct matter, that the matter of the financial support for Bushy Park chem washing and guttering, is that what's being referred to? Because that ends, the last time that council supports that 3-year understanding is this year. So is that referring to ongoing funding that matter into the future?
The intent behind, the intent of this resolution is that the 50k that they requested, that's what's referred to the Aspirations Committee through the business case process. This does not talk about the funding or support that council currently provides.
Thank you, but the support that council currently provides on the matter that I just raised, no, I'll leave it because I think it's dependent on something else. I'll withdraw. Thank you.
Great, thank you. There are no further questions here, so I'm going to move the motions on the screen, item A and item B. Councillor Philippa will be the seconder for that. So any comments in regard to this matter? This item. Okay. I've got to be quick around here, so no further comments. I'll put the motion on the screen. All those in favour? Against? Motion's carried. Thank you. So item 7 is the Whanganui Surf Lifesaving Club. What I've got on my screen here. Are we probably just back that one? No. Okay. All right. So we'll just skip to the next one then until. Yes. Okay. Okay. So the matter is that the council increases the annual grant to the Whanganui Surf Lifesaving Club by $15,000 per annum, declines the Whanganui Surf Lifesaving Club's request for an additional $10,000 per annum for administration. C, declines the Whanganui Surf Lifesaving Club's request for $10,000 for a business case submission to the long-term plan. And D, requests the Chief Executive contact the submitters and the Duncan Pavilion leaseholders to identify next steps for consideration through the business case process for the long-term plan. So, are there any questions of clarification for this item? Okay.
Yep. So just briefly, in the manager's comments, as we have said, we currently fund the service at approximately $97,000 per year, and that is for the wages element. That has been the same for the last 2 years. But it increased prior to that after a Christmas Day drowning at the beach, and the service was increased to ensure that we have that service available every day during summer, regardless of whether it's a public holiday. This Surf Lifesaving, the Surf Lifeguard Service do receive funding from a few other sources. And as you're aware, they are also doing work on their building rebuild, so they have received grants from central government for that element of the work. And this is the case around the country. Councils contribute towards not all, but part of lifeguard services payments. So at the end of the day, I mean, it is a question for elected members. We believe that if we do not provide the 15,000 to bring the level of service up, which is the increase for minimum wage, then you would be looking at a reduction in service level. So our recommendation is the 15,000 to bring it up to minimum wage, but not the 28,000 as requested for living wage. And regarding the request for the administrative costs, we do not support this, as other volunteer agencies also have to find this administration. In addition, we will be providing support directly to the Surf Lifeguard Service through the business case proposal. So I think that's all I need to say on it, but happy to take questions.
The questions, Councillor G.
My question, I think, is to our CE with regards to D. We've got the Coastal Action Plan. We've got a whole lot of things happening in that particular area. We own the Duncan Pavilion. We do not own the Surf Lifesave Club building. I mean, is this a clear enough resolution? I mean, isn't it part of a bigger plan? Or is your role to ensure that it is part of a bigger plan?
Through you, Worship. I mean, I may need some clarification over the concern of D. As I read this, we're going to progress a business case for consideration as part of the long-term plan. It would only be natural for us to engage with the people that lease the Duncan Pavilion from us and involve them in that process. I'm comfortable with how D is written, but I may be missing something.
No, it's all good.
All right. Councillor, have you finished there? Councillor Helen?
Thank you. Just a question for officers for clarification. In the future, will officers liaise with the Surf Lifesaving Club to find out what their needs are prior to us discussing to finalising budgets, rather than them having to submit to the annual plan? It's, you know, if this is a service we're funding, it would be good to have this sort of resolved earlier and brought at the beginning of the process rather than the end.
Right. I think we'll take those comments on board. I am conscious we have a number of organisations we fund, and I guess part of the long-term plan process we can address that question.
Thank you.
Okay. No further questions. Okay, you're going to move that, and do I have a seconder? And they're written, they're not on the screen, they're written on, unfortunately we don't quite have that yet. So Councillor Helen to second those. So any comments? Councillor Philippa?
Yeah, thank you. It was, this is a significant voluntary service, obviously, you know, water safety, and on our beaches is imperative. There was a death a few years ago, obviously very tragic. Similarly, there has been a death within the last few years in our splash centre. These are things that we never want to happen, and obviously drownings are quite a significant issue for this country, which we're, and look, I guess in brief, I support this, support the resolutions. You know, we contribute nearly 100,000 currently to this service, and I think that is that's really important for safety for our community. This will raise it, I guess, to about 112,000. But this whole burden should not fall on us alone. There are other significant voluntary sporting clubs, for example, who obviously do not come to us and do not get this level of funding. And I guess this is clearly around because it's water safety at our beaches. But I think the resolutions are, there are other places for them to get some support, and that resolution 4 is really important. So fantastic service. Surf Lifesaving New Zealand, has a big is important in this area, and let's just keep working with the surf club to just ensure the safety as possible of our beaches. They're doing a fantastic job, and like the splash centre, what we've found out is, we need to pay fair rates, but but not necessarily living wage in this case. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Philippa. So, look, no further comments. I'll put the motion on the screen as it's written up there and as it was. So, all those in favour? Oh, we've already got the seconder was. Yeah, it was Helen. Yep. So the motion's carried, by the way. Yep. So look, we're moving over to page 9 of the councillor's report here. Men's shed. So the item here is that the men's shed proposal that refers the men's shed proposal to the Aspirations and Projects Committee through the business case process with a long-term plan for 24 to 34. So is there any council report on this? I assume we just move straight through. The information should be there. Any questions of clarification on this item? No? Okay. Councillor Kate?
This might be annoying, but I'm just wondering about the Aspirations and Projects Committee. Has that committee talked to any other local funders just to see about whether they could be involved in a process that might fast track co-funding of some of these sorts of projects?
Maybe
it's a rhetoric. Park it.
Yeah, I would doubt it at this stage because the committee's just getting up and running, but it may be the officers have done that, I'm not sure, but I think we'll just move.
Through your worship, we have started to have some discussions with potential third-party funders in addition to the ones we already regularly engage with. I don't think the committee has had the opportunity to do that yet because it's new, but certainly not opposed to bringing the committee chair into that conversation and seeing where it goes.
Great, thank you. So look, there's no further questions, so I'm going to move the motion on the screen. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ross, thank you. Any comments on this particular item? Okay, no comments, so I'll put the motion on the screen. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. We're going to move to item number 14, which is the living wage policy. I understand there's been an amendment from the officer's recommendation, and so I'll just slow down a little bit. Okay, so we're good to go. And who provided this? Okay, Councillor Josh. So, so any other information about this from the officers? Or no. So great. No. So Councillor Josh, you've put a amendment on an alternative recommendation to that the Chief Executive brings an options report on the living wage to a future strategy and policy committee meeting. And can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Jenny? And Josh, Councillor Josh, would you like to just comment on this?
Yes, thank you. This is the latest iteration of a, shall we say, campaign spanning 3 councils in about 7 years to bring a living wage policy to this council. It's It's a debate that many of us have engaged in with in the past now. It always produces a fairly animated response from my colleague opposite, who's got his mic on and is ready to go, and look forward to hearing it again today. But essentially, what this is about in terms of today's meeting is good governance and bringing a report to a future committee. So I want to emphasise that this is not actually about making a decision. This is about setting up a process, just as we did in November 2021, to properly debate whether or not this council should adopt the living wage as a policy. I would note that my understanding is that this council does not currently employ anyone below the living wage, but as it stands at the moment, that is an operational decision determined by the Chief Executive. What this report would entertain, amongst a number of options, would be adopting the living wage as a matter of policy, which would require, I guess, an obligation on the Chief Executive to not employ anyone below the living wage. So urge you to support this. It's about good governance, and really look forward to that discussion sometime in future. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Jenny.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Our previous mayor often used to make the statement that the minimum wage is the lowest you can legally pay somebody. It's not a target. It's a starting point. The living wage is a wage in which people can perhaps lead a more acceptable life. And I would like to think that anybody who worked for the Whanganui District Council was able to actually pay their power bill, their grocery bill and their petrol bill. So that's what we're really talking about here. And I would love to see it enshrined in a policy, which currently isn't the case. Now, we may well, it's questionable, I think, well, there are questions around whether or not everybody is actually covered by the living wage at the moment, but it would be good to have that clarified and then to have that protected. And I think that's what we're looking for from a report from our CE.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rob.
Yes. Thank you, Josh, for giving me the opportunity once again to talk about the living wage. And the living wage is a political movement. You know, it's sort of going around the world. And I'm surprised that my colleague opposite me hasn't got his T-shirt on today, like the others that present on the living wage each time. You know, the Chief Executive has wisely said in the past that it's his policy to ensure that wages are relative to every other employee and to set that relativity. You know, and once you start interfering it with an artificial system like a living wage, you remove a lot of that possibility. So the living wage does not handle relativity well. What concerns me about the living wage, of course, is the way that it's set. It's set to say that the living wage is what a couple with 2 children can effectively live on, but doesn't recognise where that living might be. You know, and I've never been able to see a satisfactory argument that says that the living wage in Martin or Bulls or Whanganui should be the same living wage that is in Auckland or Wellington. It just does not make any logical sense. So I hope once again the Chief Executive will retain the right to set the wages and the relativity of wages for everybody in this council. The fact that there is nobody on this council that is on the living wage means that this is just another attempt to keep it live. And I see no reason at all to send this to the Strategy and Policy Committee. Let's decide the vote here right now. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And Councillor Ross.
Thank you. I have a question for my colleague opposite. He referred to it spanning 3 councils, and I'm aware that the vote got closer and closer in support of the living wage, and then this year we have 5 new councillors. So it could be a whole new ball game. My question is, this seems to me a very simple request. Why over the 2 previous councils was that not request put up? Sorry? I was asking a question, sorry.
No, it's a clarification of the motion that's been put in place, the alternative. So, Councillor Josh?
Yeah, thanks for the question. The answer is that it was. So in November 2021, there was an options report brought to what was then the Strategy and Finance Committee, and that options report presented a number of options, the implications of them, and it's lost by 1 vote from memory. Prior to that, the request from memory was always that an options report be brought, but it never passed this stage of the process. And so in November 2021, that was the first time since 2016, 2017, that we actually got the chance to debate an options report.
So it's another go at it. Oh.
Pretty much.
Bring out the apple.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to pass over to David just to comment on this item.
Through you, Worship, I'm going to try very hard to avoid engaging in the debate on this matter, but a comment from me to help with clarification, hopefully. First of all, I do, from a purely technical point of view, agree with Councillor Vincent that all employment matters are the chief executives. You employ me, I employ the other people that work in our organisation. But that said, something like this has got a very clear financial implication for our rate-paying community, so it would never be something that I would do unilaterally without bringing back to this council for endorsement, even if I don't technically need your permission to do it. As I mentioned earlier, it is already on our work program to revisit this matter, and it was my intention that once that work was complete, we would bring a report back to the appropriate committee or council meeting. And by way of explanation, I think there are some risks, perceived or real, to our current situation of having an unofficial policy position on paying the living wage that just plays out simply in practice. The most obvious would be a bit of an ethical dilemma over our motivations for using contracted labour, particularly in sectors such as facilities, management, cleaning, those kind of areas that already are flagged as high risk for labour exploitation. And are we simply doing it to take advantage of cheap labour because we can't do it with our own staff? I think we need to come to a definitive and much clearer position on these things with due time. So I would comment that I'm comfortable with the resolution that is on the screen at the moment, because it is allowing me to do what we intend to do to manage the organisation anyway. I would be more concerned if you were to restrict or prohibit me from bringing that report back to council, because I think it denies us the opportunity to put these things on the table and put them to bed definitively once and for all. Hopefully that's avoided the debate, but given you some clarity on the matter.
Thank you, David. So given that context, Councillor Michael and then Councillor Philippa, do you have anything still to add?
Yeah, I mean, I guess first of all, I commend my colleague for bringing this up, but I would like to remind us the standing orders dictates that if 4 people agree, we can force the chair and the CE to put something on agenda anyway. So you don't require 6 people, you just require 4 to say, let's do it, and we force the agenda anyway. But it is nice to bring it up, and everyone can see. But you only require 4 votes today. This is wider than Whanganui District Council. This is whether or not we go into a certification process, whether or not we look at our value chains, how much we audit them. This is something I expect the CE to do, to be honest, understanding who's being paid minimum wage and therefore moving on. I really want to see this though, David, because the reason why I want to see this is because I want to see what do you think, who are we as an employer? What are the employee journeys going to be? Are we going to bring on juniors? Are we going to promote our people and escalate them so we can reduce consultants later on? I think a much wider employment journey that will include living wage, I look forward to. So thank you for already preempting that.
Right, yeah, thanks. Councillor Philippa.
Yeah, look, thanks for the resolution, Councillor Josh. I mean, I may or may not support it, but I just want to, you know, and yes, I mean, I think a big part of this is about leadership to the wider community. I get that. But really, you know, I guess bringing this report is going to take, we've got our officers and CE are under the pump. We have significant work on. We've got significant cost pressures around, you know, the sergeant and the port we know are significant project. I mean, these are the things that are really affecting the cost to our ratepayer. This cost of living crisis is a real deal. I've been on count, this is my 17th annual plan, I reckon, and 8.2%, this increase we are looking at is the biggest ever. We have some ratepayers, we know we have a significant number of our properties going to have to pay significantly more than that. And so that's where I really get to, is do we really want to take this on at the moment? And you know, the government is a responsibility to deal with lifting minimum wage so that people can actually afford to feed their families and roof their families. So I may or may not support this. This seems harmless enough, but I just don't think it's the right time really for our community in the next year or two.
Great, thank you. I'm going to close the comments. So we're going to put the motion on the screen that the Chief Executive brings an options report on the living wage to a future strategy and policy committee meeting. All those in favour? Right. Against? Councillor Robb, Councillor Ross, Councillor Philippa, Councillor Charlie, and
It's not comment time.
So Helen, so if we could just do it again.
put your hands up. Put your hands up. All those are in favour of this particular motion. Oh, stop pointing at that. Sorry. Yeah, no, sorry, it's very confusing. Okay. So I'm voting against it. So. Okay. So just bear with. Okay. Yep. Yep.
Can we just take a moment, please, if that's all right?
Yeah, we'll just. What's that? Okay, we're going to ask the floor one more time. The fours. Okay. All right. Okay. Items. The motion is lost. Is that right? Okay. All right. I'm also conscious of time as well. I'm trying to go fast, as you can see, but also trying to respect each one as well, because these are, after all, our community's views that we're trying to go through, so trying to find the balance. The next lot is items number 10 through to 24, excluding number 14, which is the living wage policy, which we've discussed. We're going to do this as one. Do you want me to read them out, or just the headings?
Yes, I've got.
I'm just going to read the headings out, if that's okay, which is Castlecliff Reserve, 11 Manuka Street Roading upgrade, number 12 is the Repertory Theater, 13 is Progress Castlecliff, 15 Waimarie tourism and leading edge strategy replacement, stormwater upgrade, College Street, Grey Street, London Street road safety, Turawa Road stream flooding, Ngatarua stream, footpath extension opposite Collegiate School, Glasgow Street speed concerns, tram route extension, Federated Farmers multiple issues, and request to remove funding for the tide. So all of those, and so before we do, are there any officer comments? So we'll move to clarification or questions. Councillor Jenny.
And number 11, the one on the Manuka Street that we added in Cross Street, it just needs a refinement that wherever it is.
Yep, that was back there.
Up there, that one, stop, yeah. And the designation of Cross Street. So it's the upgrade of Manuka Street and the designation of Cross Street.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? I see Councillor Rob.
I want to speak to 16, 18 and 19, please. I don't want to ask questions on it.
Okay. It's in relation to 68 stormwater upgrade, College Street, Grey Street, Turawa Road stream flooding and Ngatarua stream. It seems to have gone off. Can you press your button?
Wanting us to speak to them now.
It's questions of clarification.
No, I haven't got any
Oh,
questions.
okay, that's fine.
I just want to
So
speak
no
to them.
no questions. So I'm going to put all of those items. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Philippa. All right, thank you. So comments, Councillor Rob.
Thank you. I specifically want to speak to 16, 18 and 19 about the stormwater issues that are now confronting this community. And adding to that, you've got to add Bennington Road as well. There are a considerable number of stormwater issues where people are getting severely affected. You know, and it really concerns me that we had a stormwater assessment done and an assessment of cost a couple of years ago, and priorities were allocated to the various elements of the work. The number one priority went to Harrison Street, and I still question that number one priority in terms of the real serious problems that people in College Street, Grey Street, Turawa Road and that round Putiki Drive are actually experiencing. I don't know anybody that has had water above floor level in Harrison Street, even in the 2015 flood. I don't believe there was water above floor level. That's what is actually happening to some of these people, especially those on Putiki Drive. And I know that there's work, it says here we'll form a special interest group, but, you know, this goes back so long. 2009 was the first report done on Putiki Drive. And if you read the report, it made recommendations. And one of the recommendations in Ngatarua Stream was to build a retention pond. Now, and Horizons have, this is their mandate. They said last year that it was included in their plan. The latest information I have heard is that it is now not included in their plan. So I think that we have to not only form an interest group, we have to be a very strong advocate to Horizons to get something done, because this is just getting deferred. And I know that the language here is we'll look at this in the long-term plan, but it's all so easy with that sort of language to say, well, we'll do it in 2030 or something like that. You know, this is urgent work. All these people in these areas need urgent work. Thank you.
Point well raised. Thank you, Rob. So, yeah, look, no further comments on any of these, I take it. So with that in mind, I'll put all of these items on the screen as they are listed, and for the sake of reading them out, I've read out the headings. So all those in favour? Against? Okay. All motions are carried. Thank you. Then we've got... Sorry, just trying to work out where we're at. Bear with. Right, I'm just going to pass over to Mike Firma very soon, but we go back to the start, that the council incorporates all decisions made during the deliberations into the final annual plan 23 to 24 and fees and charges 23 to 24 for formal adoption by council on 20 June or 27 June 2023, and C, notes the cuts and deferral schedule for the annual plan 23-24 budget. So I'm going to pass over to Mike Firma to comment on those items.
Just to give you an update.
You just bring your microphone up.
Sorry. To give you an update where we are now, we've gone through those items. The current rates are sitting at 8.29% or 8.3%, residential 8.7, commercial 6.5, farming 7.8, and lifestyle 13.
All right. Okay, thank you. So are there any councillor questions in regard to these two items, A and B? Councillor Philippa?
Well, just for real clarity, this is not adopting the annual plan. That's correct? There'll be another opportunity to speak to this, which is not to say, yep. But it's okay, so after this, the officers would go away and confirm, get everything set up, confirm that 8.3, bring that back for the 30th of 20th or 27th of June, and that's when we actually adopt, or possibly don't, the annual plan. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Thank you. No further clarifications or questions. So I'll put the recommendations on the screen, that council incorporates all decisions made during the deliberation into the final annual plan and fees and charges for a formal adoption by council on 20 June or 27 June, and B, notes the cuts and deferral schedule for the annual plan 23-24. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kate. Thank you. Any comments? Councillor Kate, and then Councillor Jenny.
Thank you. I will just add my thanks to your thanks at the start of the meeting, Mr. Mayor. One thing that continues to impress me and is part of the joy of being on council is the team that David has around him and the team that puts up the work for us. Just going through the whole consultation process, I have been continually impressed at how your team anchors back to the community and the importance of hearing from the community. So without that intent and will, I don't think this process would work as well. So congratulations to you and your team, David, and thank you.
sure, thanks, Councillor Cater. I'm sure that's echoed by everyone around the room. It's been for many of us, it's the first time we've been through this process, but to hear from a returning councillor, that's heartening, and congratulations to David and your team. Councillor Jenny.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Just further on from my colleague across the room with regards to staff, the work that staff and councillors have put into this annual plan has been extraordinary, and the extra work and the extra thinking that's gone into it has been extreme this year. And it's just really sad for me that all of that work kind of gets lost in the current revaluation of our community and where that's landed, and that so many of our communities are looking at such extraordinarily high rate rises, while others in the probably more affluent areas are looking at reductions, and it's out of our hands. It's completely out of our hands, and we're unable to do anything about that. And I think that's really sad, and I think that does take away, well, it sadly takes away from the very hard work and diligent community-based work that's gone on in this process. So that's that aspect. The other aspect is the cuts and deferral schedule in future. Could we have the cuts in one column and the deferrals in another? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Philippa.
Yeah, look, I appreciate, and I will make this quite brief, that there's going to be another opportunity when we formally adopt this annual plan to speak. But I don't think it should go unnoted. As I mentioned briefly before, it's been confirmed that what the decisions we've made today are close to an 8.3 average rate increase, 8.7 for residential rate. And this is with the 16th or so annual plan deliberation. This is the most significant increase ever over the time I've been at this seat. The triple whammy, we talked about a double whammy of the QV valuations and their effect. And that effect on some of our most socially deprived communities, we know is going to hit, possibly be about 800 properties, way more than that 8.7. That is real money they have to get in a cost of living crisis. And they have to make, while they're dealing with possible house, their houses being refinanced, their loan repayments, etc. So, and the cost of living, the revaluations, and thirdly, apart from what seemed to be the significant issue with the Aviary, this is the Sergeant Gallery. That is the second biggest rate increase in this annual plan of 1.7%. And that's taken that commitment from the ratepayer from $5 million to $14.6 million in this annual plan. That's not a one-off hit. That's going to have significant debt and interest payments for years to come. It's got $500,000 of debt repayment in the year we're deciding. But we need to understand, even our own document has told us that with the rate with this rate increase, an average suburban home, it's not $5 a week. It's an extra kind of $11+ a week. That's over $570 a year. And for a bigger home, some of these ones we're talking about that are going to have significant rate increases, we talk about in our document an extra $32 a week. That's nearly $1,700 a year. So I'm going to not say anything. I'm going to leave it at that. But it's important, but this is a significantly difficult plan, and next year will be no different. The Sergeant Gallery and the port, I guess all I will say, we have to do stuff better. We just have to. I appreciate staff. Thank you. My first comment was to thank staff, thank our submitters, and thank our community, thank our volunteers. But we have to do better. That's our jobs, and I'm very concerned, and I'm sure we all are. But I will be struggling to support this annual plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Michael.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Yeah, I'd like to say, first of all, wage increases in Whanganui were 5.6%. CPI inflation was around 8%. We know local government inflation was around 13%. Cost of living for our people was upwards of 30%. So when we say 8.3%, we shouldn't be happy. We put a lot of work in, but we shouldn't be happy about it, especially when a lot of people are getting a lot larger. I had an 11% increase last year. I'm having an 11% increase this year. So there's no difference to me. It's been a horrible last 2 years for me. It's not a great outcome, but I understand the work we've all put in and the restrictions that we've had. What I would like to say is that if we hadn't have been hit from behind, decisions that were made, governance that happened prior to a lot of us even joining council, hadn't have been made, then we would have hit my targets of below 5.6%. A lot of items we have no choices on. And I think a lot of us new people look at it and go, what do you mean we have no choices? We had no choices. The decisions have been made and we cannot undo them without legal consequences. So to my colleague to my left, I totally understand their frustration in the fact, especially if they've been talking about this for many years. I'd like to use the opportunity to learn from this. We know there's at least 3 to 4 years of impact from previous councils that we're going to have to deal with, and just like councils who don't add to the debt to our children, we shouldn't be adding to debt to the next councillors who come up after us. So I think that's a good thing to look at when we look at these annual plans and long-term plans. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Helen.
Okay, thanks very much. Look, I know we're all hungry. I did want to say, though, it is tough out there, and I think we all acknowledge that a lot of that impact is from increased interest rates and inflation. We can't forget that we've actually worked really hard, and we've got some amazing big projects out there that are actually supporting Whanganui into the future. The impacts, though, in terms of you get high interest rates and high inflation, it does have an impact. But yes, it is going to hit us all, and it's going to hit our farmers too, because they actually do get quite a whack on the rates. Our businesses not so much, because of the way that we allocate rates, so they are supported. So retail, it's going to get hard, but they've actually had quite low relative increases over the years, and that's still in place. So look, I think we've worked really hard to make some cuts, and it's hard. I just don't see how we could have done any more without really starting to impact the community, because it's big numbers. But I think next year's unfortunately even going to get harder. So I think whilst we can be doom and gloom about the percentage rise, a lot of it is out of our control, but also Whanganui is actually in a really good place. We're not going backwards, we're actually still going forward in growth. And it's fairly robust out there, so I think we can hold our heads up and say we're tracking okay, and that it's about that long-term big impact we can make on making sure we've got a really robust economy and a strong economy, and that will get us through this tough time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rob.
Thank you. Yes, I echo what Councillor Philippa said. An 8.3% increase is certainly the highest I have seen on any council that I have been on in the Whanganui District Council. And it disappoints me that we weren't able to achieve what we were heading for, which was something with a 7 in front of it. I think the public in general were reasonably acceptable of a rate increase around the rate of inflation, and that's certainly in that 7% range. I do support the decision that Mike Fermor has outlined before about not interfering in this rates process. I think it's really easy to do that, and I had my fears earlier on that we might be going to do it, but my experience in the past is that any area that has had an above average increase this valuation, in 3 years' time, they're likely to have a below value increase. And that is already occurring now, where you see that the market value is probably lower than the rateable value on a lot of these properties. It's coming out now. So I think that interfering in it, I think you make it difficult next time to actually enjoy those reductions below average for those areas that have experienced a high valuation now. I also think that councillors conducted a very open process in setting the rates this time. I applaud the resolve of councillors to ensure that we keep the rates as low as possible, because I think that is a very important resolve to have for all councillors. And I think if councillors relax that, I think you'll see higher rate increases. So congratulations to all my colleagues on that. As I said, we're not comfortable about 8.3%, but I think in the circumstances it's the best that could be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, there are no further comments, and what I will do is just wrap up by saying that thank you. We've already lots of thank yous, but they deserve it, because we thank you to the community first of all for the increase in submissions this year. Thank you for across a number of different items. Thank you for David and our council officers. And I said I'm not going to go through names, but you know who you are, and I don't want to leave anyone off the list. But also thank you to our elected members as well. We've pushed really hard to get it to here. We believe that where we are right now is the right balance, and so it's pretty tough. There's no, it's kind of a, you know, my phrase, a theory of second best. There is no great solution. We all want low rates, but we're in an environment where that's just not going to happen. So thank you once again. So look, I'm just going to put the motion on the screen as it's written. All those in favour? Against? That's good. Motion is carried. All right. So look, I'm conscious people's stomachs are rumbling, but can my recommendation is that we carry on and just get this done, and hopefully at a big breakfast. But if anyone disagree with that? 5-minute break? Okay, 5-minute break. So back at, or 7-minute break, back at 2 o'clock on the dot.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. All right. So who else is there? Is Councillor Michael? He should be here. So we got a quorum. I assume we have. Just okay. So we carry on. So the next item is community-led approach to the North Mole and the Coastal Action Plan at Castlecliff. I'm going to first of all pass over to David to talk to this item. Thanks, David.
Through your worship, in the interests of time, I'm going to introduce this item and try and be brief about it. The project in question is already included in our long-term plan, but we have had an unsolicited request from Progress Castlecliff to take a community-led approach to its delivery. From my point of view, one of the appeals of this opportunity is that it really speaks to our core purpose as local government. And if I quote from the Local Government Act, we are here to enable local decision making and action by and on behalf of communities. So this is a real opportunity for us to hand over the reins and allow the community to do something for itself, the action by. And it speaks very much to our core purpose. We are, though, conscious of risk, and from a management point of view, we want to make sure that our community is well supported, but also from a governance point of view, you have the appropriate checks, balances and stage gates in place so that you can so we can collectively support Progress Castlecliff towards a positive outcome for the community if you choose to proceed with the community-led approach. So the report before you sets out the options. The office's recommendation is that we support a community-led approach in principle. We put in place a funding agreement, and in that funding agreement we specify the checkpoints where Progress Castlecliff need to come back to council to check in and seek further approval to proceed to the next stage. The first one would be to allow them to start work on the community consultation to refine and develop the concept plan. When that is ready, they come back to the council, present the concept plan, present the outcome of their community feedback. Then you can make a decision as to whether you want to allow them to proceed to the next stage. So that's the officer's recommendation. There's option 2 would be a commitment to only letting them lead the engagement piece on the North Mole and the Coastal Action Plan. And option 3 is just to maintain the status quo. We decline their option and we continue with a traditional council-led approach to the project. The team are here to answer questions, but I am aware you have had a workshop from Progress Castlecliff, and I'm also conscious that our staff really ought to only be speaking to matters of risk and management rather than advocating on behalf of a third party for what is effectively their unsolicited proposal. So we'll open up to questions if you have them.
All right. So I take it there's nothing for Tamsin or Elise to add to that, for David's?
To acknowledge the work of Jamie Waugh in bringing this to us, and Ngā Ringaringa Waiwai, Hapu and the community and everyone who has, as you'll see from the paper, led a significant amount of work so far. Unfortunately, Jamie was unable to attend today as he is quite busy, but as David mentioned, he has presented material to elected members and gives his apologies. Otherwise, we are happy to take the paper as read. As you'll see, there's a significant amount of information in there and attachments. And I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Tamsin, who recently started in the policy team and has been an absolute star, which is a complete understatement, and has worked really hard on this paper. And also acknowledging the intersect with the Coastal Action Plan. And so we're quite happy to talk to those elements as well. So otherwise, thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Tamsin, for good. It sounds like a great beginning. So so going to questions, clarification questions. Councillor Jenny.
I think Elise made my comment, you know, Jamie was really hoping to be able to present. He was all ready to present to the Operations and Performance Committee, but it was taken from that agenda. I'm not 100% sure why. He would love to be here today and be able to, you know, answer questions directly to people, but he has other obligations, so yeah. And a huge thank you. I know the work that's gone on behind the scenes to get this done, and it's top notch. Thank you very much.
All right, Councillor Ross.
Yep. 2 questions. It's probably me being pedantic, but that is my nature. In Part A, it says, endorses a community-led approach in principle to the North Mole car park and amenities. I get that. And the Castlecliff portion of the Coastal Action Plan. Are you saying, in that second part, as it relates to the North Mole, or are you saying there are other activities in the Coastal Action Plan that Progress Castlecliff will have some control over? Is it specifically just as it relates to the North Mole?
No, that is not specifically. Specifically relating to the North Mole, there are wider elements of the Coastal Action Plan which we believe Progress Castlecliff can also support through a community-led approach. So as you'll see in the attachment, their attachments 7, 8 and 9 have the management options for the North Mole, Morgan Street and Rangiora Street, and then specifically Rangiora Street. So it's those specific areas that we believe they can also take this work forward.
Okay, thank you. Second question is, and I'm sure in the goodness of time this will be clarified, project manager. So at some stage, I assume there'll be some sort of interaction between council and Ngā Ringa Waiwai as to who actually leads the project.
When you say who leads the project, you mean in the future or for the first stage, which is the community engagement? Because for the first stage, what we're proposing is a funding and relationship agreement be drafted up, and in that case it will be Progress Castlecliff through Ngā Ringa Waiwai managing that stage of it.
I suppose specifically I'm referring to whose head is at the top of the pyramid when construction and all that starts and the oversight.
I'll let David answer that one since he's at top of our food chain.
Thank you. So through you, Worship, just for clarity, if you go with the officer's recommendation, you are in principle handing over the control and the accountability for the delivery of this project to Progress Castlecliff. So who would be at the top of the food chain? It would be Progress Castlecliff, because they will be the ones with the authority and the mandate to deliver the project. My understanding from Jamie in the discussions I've had with him is if they get the green light, then they would go and find somebody with the suitable skill set to fill that project management role and lead the actual delivery of the project when they get to that appropriate stage. It's also, though, why we're proposing those stage gates and those check-ins with council in the funding agreement, so that you can make sure that you have the confidence in the setup that Progress Castlecliff. Have they got the right skills to deliver the project with credibility? If you're satisfied, then you can allow them to pass through that stage gate and go into the next stage. If you're not, you can hit pause or stop and ask them to do something different.
So that includes whomever they decide to lead the... See, Ngā Ringa Waiwai is actually only 3 people at the moment. Progress Castlecliff is a larger committee of about 10. So whomever they find at that stage, are you saying that they will bring that person's name to you, and if we councillors or you as CE are comfortable or not comfortable, it confirms it or not?
So through you, Your Worship, the funding agreement will be drafted in such a way where there is certainly a requirement for them to provide a project plan for how they're going to deliver the work. Normal practice, if we engage third parties, say contractors or consultants to do pieces of work, we would expect to see CVs of the key people that are going to be involved so that we can assess their credibility and their chance, the probability of success of that team. I don't see any reason why we would take a different approach in this instance, because it's all part of our usual safeguarding mechanism when we are engaging third parties to do work on our behalf.
Thank you.
Councillor Kate.
Thank you. I think the information that we've had is very, what's the right word? Not robust, but like is impressive. And I think, as you've outlined, there's a question coming, as you've outlined, David, you know, we are legislatively bound to get involved in this work, and I think it will be a good thing if we have the right things in places. In the officer's recommendation D, you talk about an appropriate relationship and funding agreement with Progress Castlecliff. So I guess my question to you would be, and I'm thinking about the principles of how we're going to engage. So I guess that's more of a comment, but my real question is, in terms of due diligence, how are we going, like I wouldn't imagine that Progress Castlecliff has significant assets, and if things turned bad, you know, normally you would be looking at a contractor to ensure that they have sufficient background and financial support to deliver on contracts. How are we going to mitigate for the risk around that?
So, through you, Worship, I may just talk a little bit broadly and then bring it back to try and answer your question. As Councillor Fallon has already asked, who is accountable? And I suppose the answer that I gave before is probably only 95% correct. You are taking this project out of my basket and put it into Progress Castlecliff's basket if you agree with the officer's recommendation. But I suppose that doesn't completely absolve me of any responsibility or accountability for this project, because we fully expect to retain a role of supporting Progress Castlecliff in order to be successful. So we're not just going to take a step back and say, you're on your own, Jamie and team. We're going to be there making sure that they have some expertise from our teams to support them as and when they need it. Part of the funding agreement will also be putting some of our normal requirements in place to preserve things like our probity and approach to procurement, and making sure that the right skills are brought to bear when Jamie does build his team. So that will involve things like using credible contractors, so that you still preserve the safeguards of having a contractor with professional indemnity insurance and all of those other things in place, and that we don't get a very amateur approach to delivering this project, even though it is delivered by the community. I'm not sure I can give you definitive answers yet, because we need to sit down and actually draft the funding agreement. We want to check in with you before we execute any agreement to make sure that as a governance team you have a comfort that there are enough stage gates and check-in points there, and we'll consult with you as we get our legal team to draw that up. But certainly, hopefully, this gives you enough of an indicator of our intent to have some comfort to make the decision today.
I guess the way the recommendation's drafted, it's that we're directing you to put it in place, that we don't actually get to have another look.
Like I say, the intention is to engage with you and get your feedback once we've got an initial draft. We didn't want to preempt a decision today by engaging a legal team to start drafting an agreement, because that would come at a cost. But certainly I have no intention of, again, unilaterally charging off drafting a funding agreement and executing it without some oversight from you as a team. I would be of the view you don't necessarily need a resolution to achieve that, but if you wanted to make an addition and say that you wanted to see the agreement before it was executed, I have no issue with that.
Anything else? Okay.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how we'd draft a resolution to reflect that. I mean, I don't need it to be in resolution. The Chief Executive understands what our intent is. Up to the meeting, really, whether you think that we need it.
I think it's personally, I think I'm happy with that personally, but I'll move over to Councillor Rob.
Yeah, I certainly support community group to do this. The only thing I would question is why Progress Castlecliff want to do this, and just find out that answer to that, because this is basically a roading and parking project that I can see on the plans. There's a toilet there, whereas community groups would get involved in the enhancement of the area, you know, street furniture, art projects, all that sort of thing, and leave the basics, the roading and the parking, to council, core business. That was certainly the approach with Majestic Square. So that's, if Project Castlecliff want to take this on, good luck to them. But I wonder why. What's their motivation for doing this?
Through your worship, look, it's not appropriate for officers to speak to Progress Castlecliff's motivation. All we can say is they are motivated and they want to do this. From our point of view, having that community ownership of the end product is likely to be highly advantageous. So regardless of their motivations, we're happy to recommend it. I don't know what the motivation is.
Could I respond?
Sure.
Trying to keep it brief. Progress Castlecliff were the drivers behind the Rangiora Street development, which was pretty much roading and the like, infrastructure related. And it was very, well, it's been extremely successful, couldn't have been more successful. With regards to the North Mall, it's not just a car park. The car park is the impetus for a whole lot of other things to happen in the area, including the cycle way. There's a lot of artworks, but it's all the dune work as well. There's just so many other elements that are going to come in as part of this project that will roll from it. And so it's about community passion and desire to see things done, to get underway and get it done in as timely way as possible. And now is the time to do it with the North Mall development. So it's a community passion with the ability to follow through.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, from my perspective, I talk about the concept of community a lot and how that plays itself out, manifests itself in many different ways, and how we can, community owning something like this, I think is great. But with their motivation, not sure. But I think it's fantastic that they're putting their hand up. Councillor Helen, comment?
We're on comments?
We're on questions. Sorry,
just comments.
Okay, right. So no further questions. I'm going to move the recommendations on the screen. Okay. I'll let Kate move it then, and you can second it. Yep. All right. Great. So comments.
Do you want to go first? No, okay. Thank you. Look, I'd like to thank Progress Castlecliff and Jamie for putting this comprehensive proposal together. I'm not going to say it's a leap of faith on our behalf, because I think they've actually proven themselves time and time again. It's just a different way of working, which I think we want to embrace anyway. To me, the important thing is the document that sets the framework of how we agree, how we're going to work together. So it's very, very clear at each phase, approvals step by step, and this, and this is a long-term journey because there's no money at this stage for everything that's in their plan, but it certainly needs to happen, and I've got a huge confidence that this is a great group to get that underway. What I think we need to be aware of is that we're going to partner with them. This is a supportive role that we will take, because I think it's quite a big project, and so I want to be really open with them that they can come back at any time and talk to us about it and say, yeah, actually, you know, this is getting bigger than we thought. What can we do? I mean, we're expecting them to obviously come back to us, and we won't give approvals for any expenditure unless there's money. But still, you know, let's treat this as something special, as a partnership, and we'll, you know, go on that journey with them. And so I'm very excited about it, actually, and it'll be interesting to see how it gets on over the years. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, I'm just going to pass over to David to make a comment.
Just through you, Your Worship, whilst I don't want to kind of quash the spirit of partnership that's been articulated, that I just do want to be clear so that I don't accidentally put my own neck in a noose. We do need to be clear that the relationship is on a funding only basis. One of the primary reasons for that is any other kind of relationship where there is still some kind of accountability for the delivery through me and my organisation means that I remain an officer under the Health and Safety at Work Act, and I will very adamantly tell you now that I would not commit to handing over control of a project whilst retaining that personal liability, because it does involve fines and potential jail time that lands with me as a person. So partnership and spirit, yes, absolutely, and we want to support, but we do need to be clear that the relationship is one where we were handing over lock, stock and barrel control of the project, and we are a funder only, because that is the only way that that liability doesn't sit with me personally, and it is fundamental to the fact that I'm comfortable to make this recommendation today.
Right, yeah, thank you. Kate?
Thank you. I think that's a good word of caution. I am excited, like my colleague, I'm excited about this and appreciate the goodwill involved in getting into an arrangement like this. I am in no doubt about what Progress Castlecliff's motivation for doing this is. It is about best bangs for our buck. It's about best possible outcomes. And when I heard Jamie and his presentation, it was very clear to me that it was about best possible outcomes by doing that mix of community and what basically council resource, I guess. So thank you. I really appreciate it, David. The goodwill that you bring to the table and getting involved in something like this. I have no doubt that it will have its wrinkles, but it will be a good outcome for our community. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Jenny.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this whole project rests on relationship. It is going to be handed over to Ngā Ringaringa Waiwai, a subgroup of Progress Castlecliff under the Progress Castlecliff umbrella. And it does have to have that distance that David has outlined, but at the same time, there's going to the relationships are so close, and the reporting will be so continual, and the blending of staff and those involved in the project will be so continuous that it is, I hope, is going to be as seamless as possible. Yes, there'll be the odd learning in there, but let's make sure that those learnings are flagged ahead, are well managed, the risks around them are well articulated and mitigated, and that we can then use this, because I just see this as not so much to start because we've done other projects, but as the way we're going to do things with other community groups in other suburbs and parts of Whanganui over and over again, because it gives us so much more resource and funding than what we've currently got. So I'm really, really keen to see how this rolls. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Jenny. And just to, without labouring this point too much, I think as we move forward, it's be great to see how this goes, and I think it's to see Progress Castlecliff or Ringaringa Waiwai to progress this and learn from it, and so that hopefully other community groups can pick up what they've done and use that as a model going forward for how we engage with, but also implement initiatives across our community. So, great. So with that, if there are no further comments, I'll put the motion on the screen. And forgive me for not reading it, but I assume it's on the screen for public to read. So all those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. And with that, I believe the meeting is closed. Thank you very much. I can hear stomachs rumbling on the microphone.